Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He spent 20 years in the U.S. Army, 16 of which as a Special Forces Green Beret. He then transitioned into a CIA security contractor gig, and that's about the most I can say about that, if you get my fucking drift. He's the CEO of Fieldcraft Survival, which provides a host of different training opportunities that we'll delve deep into. MacGyver jerks off to his YouTube channel, and he once rescued Bear Grylls with only a loincloth and a box of paper clips. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Mike Glover.
Thanks for having me, man. Thank you. That's a hell of an intro.
Well, that's about all I'm good for as a fucking intro, so it's all downhill from here. But I would like to take a quick second to say thank you. I know you're from out of town. Your schedule's busy as shit. I appreciate you taking the time to come on. You were just on our good friend Sean Ryan's show, which I have not listened to yet on purpose so that it doesn't fuck this interview up. But for sure I will as soon as we're done here. But I appreciate you coming on and making the rounds, my man.
No, thanks for having me, man. It's mutual. I know you're busy, man. We've been trying to do it for a while, but thank you so much for having me out here.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Quick shout out to Origin Labs, the maker of Jocko's, all of Jocko's products, as well as their own line of all their different supplements, and they make gis and boots and jeans now as well. They've been a consummate supporter of the podcast for a while now, and we appreciate their support and sponsorship, as well as teamdog.pet, which is my online training platform. If you have a dog, even if you don't, you want to learn how to train your kids, your spouse, you're a coach with athletes, a teacher with students, whatever, go ahead, sign up, $99 a year. It'll change your life, I promise, even if for the worse. One quick update on the crates. A lot of people have been asking about my crates. They are finally out. They are available for pre-order. You can go on tricos.com and order them. They will ship here in the next couple weeks toward the end of January. And looking forward to those coming out. They will be a game changer for sure in the dog industry. When was the last time you thought to yourself, what the fuck have I gotten myself into?
Oh my gosh.
Does that happen often?
That's it, like every day. No,
sitting here.
That's driving across Dallas, realizing how large Dallas is. I'm not a big fan of urban structures and development, and I was driving across yesterday, getting set up in the Airbnb, and an hour and a half into the drive, I'm still looking at businesses and concrete, and like, man, all this oil and gas money's going somewhere, man.
Yeah, this place is fucking huge. It's expansive, and it just keeps growing. I mean, I've been here for about 10 years now, and I'm baffled, frankly. I mean, you can't go anywhere without it being like full-blown Southern California caliber traffic. It's fucking nuts, and it's just huge. I mean, it takes 2 hours to drive across, but yeah, the what the fuck have I gotten myself into? I'm right there with you. It happens about every day. But what's the most miserable you've ever been during training?
Oh man, I've had a whole bunch of instances where I was in a suck fest before. Man, going back to Ranger School, I mean, that's a classic one. Being 18 years old, not really knowing what to expect and just absorbing the suck. Dahlonega was pretty tough. Dahlonega in the mountains, going from the mud and the crappy sand hills of Fort Benning, Georgia, and then headed to the mountains. I mean, I've had many instances in my military career, but that's where it really started. In Ranger School, I was just a private first class, and just getting. I mean, biggest thing for me is food.
Yeah.
I'm a big kid. I'm a fat kid. I like to eat, and not being able to eat for 2 months or however long that school was, that was hard for me. Yeah.
That's the one thing, a best friend of mine growing up, he went to Ranger School and then followed on into some similar foot traffic as you did. But, that's one of the things that, from the SEAL team standpoint, is that they're very good about feeding the shit out of us.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no shortage of fucking calories. Maybe we're all fat kids at heart. I don't know, but just being in the water all the time and everything else, like that's the one thing that they don't shy away from or scrimp on is calories. I mean, I remember, especially during Hell Week, I mean, like you have what they call midnight rations, where you have a fourth meal, in the middle of the night because you're going 24/7. But, I mean, you're taking in probably 15, 18,000 calories a day during Hell Week.
Gosh, that would be amazing.
And it's just, I mean, it's as much as you want, basically. You can go back for seconds, you can get whatever the fuck you want. But I don't know how you guys do it, honestly. That 2 months would especially at that age, my metabolism, the way that
oh my gosh,
it would have fucking killed me.
Yeah. 1 meal a day. That's all it was.
Yeah. And it's an MRE, is that right?
Yeah, it's MRE. Yeah.
I mean, I lost 27 pounds in SEER school in 6 fucking days, going through at that age. So 2 months would have fucking killed me. But do you think that speed traps should be illegal?
Ooh, that's a good one. I do. I think it's recently. I was just in a speed trap and where it went from 55 to 35, and I'm like, come on, man! Like you don't even have the time to get down and decelerate. It's more dangerous to get in a speed trap and decelerate traffic and have somebody smash into you. Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah, shit drives me nuts. I mean, to me, if you have to hide to do your job, you're doing it wrong.
Exactly.
What's your favorite metal band, and in contrast, hip hop artist, if you have either?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna be probably a stereotypical headbang band. Metallica. I love Metallica, man. They're a classic band. They should get credit for being pioneers in the space, for bringing it more to the into popular culture. I'm an old school hip hop kind of guy. I like old stuff like De La Soul and people who rap and you can actually hear what they say. Yeah. That stopped for me in like 1989. Like I don't have any, after that time period and everybody just started mumbling, I just got away from it. Yeah. I don't think I even listen to music anymore. I just podcast. Yeah. I still listen to a lot of music. Hip hop wise, I always liked Busta Rhymes was a good mix. Oh yeah. He was good.
Like he was fast, but it was still unique. I guess there was still good quality in a lot of his lyrics. But where's your favorite place to camp / get away?
Oh yeah,
it's got to be Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado's part of it. I mean, there's a system that moves down through the tail ends of the Rockies in Silverton, Colorado. I lived in Durango for a period of time, but just running through Bryce Canyon and all the way down into where I live in Prescott, I love that entire environment. Yeah. Basically the south rim of the Grand Canyon, all the way to the Rocky Mountains, all that terrain you can get lost in is so majestic. It's beautiful because it's not oversaturated with people. Yeah, I like everything in there, but Telluride, Oprah lives in Telluride. I just stay away from that place.
Why? Why would you stay away? You're not a fan of Oprah? Yeah. No way.
It's like the yuppies. It's like the Aspen of that area,
I know, it's
just I don't like it.
Yeah, looking at a lot of your stuff on social media, I think you and I have a lot in common camping wise that way. I've seen your Forerunner rig set up. I have a truck set up similar with a rooftop tent and a shell on it. And every summer I take my kids on this long extended camping / hiking trip for several weeks usually, and it's just fucking awesome. But I love that that kind of not living off the land, but just that almost survivalist type of experience for perspective and just kind of rounding out your ability to see things a little differently. I think that shit's necessary. I love doing it as much as possible. Is there a kind of a basic necessity, almost a go bag truck version for you, like when you go camping, that like here's some key pieces of fucking gear that you take that are instrumental? Yeah,
always. I always encourage people to carry, I always look at rigs in whatever form or fashion. It could be your Honda Civic hatchback as an extension of your capability. I can only carry so much crap on me as an individual, but if you have a vehicle, I mean, that's a big rucksack. Yeah. And so when I go out camping, whether it's with family or friends, I'm prepared, especially in survival. I mean, if you're austere and you're getting off the grid like I like to get, which means essentially getting away from people. Yeah. I'm more remote. And so I'm away from cell phone towers. I'm away from emergency services. I'm away from hospitals. And so I like to have all that stuff on hand to be able to take care of myself. So survival, the basics of survival, fire, water, shelter, etc. And then med especially, whether that's, an IFAC, an individual first aid kit or field kit, tourniquets, pressure bandages and gauze, the basics. I think that's essential. And whether you're in an urban environment and just commuting to work or you're camping, that kind of doesn't change. I mean, it should be there as a staple, and you just kind of fire and forget and pull it out when you have the opportunity to practice it. And I think you'll be set up for success that way.
Yeah. Do you agree 100%? In terms of sustenance, do you kind of prescribe to the dehydrated meal or pre-meal stuff, or do you harvest your own shit hunting when you're out and about, or what does that look like when you get out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I integrate in my life comes from my love of my own business, which is survival, obviously. But if I'm off grid, and like I've done this before, I've gone on a lake ice fishing trip, and we didn't bring food because we're going to source the food. We're going to catch trout. We're going to skin it, gut it, and cook it, and then live that way off grid. I'm a big fan of taking care of my body, whether it's health or wellness, through subsistence. So I like wild game. I like eating off the land, but I also like carrying cans of sardines. Yeah. What I don't like is MREs. Yeah. Because if you ever take an MRE shit, it will wreck your guts.
If you've ever tried to take an MRE shit.
Oh, yeah. It'll blow out your guts. Yeah. So I kind of try to spoil myself, whether it's fresh vegetables, fresh food, bringing it out, and then a good IPA or a good beer. Yeah. I'm all about that.
In terms of the sleeping setup, do you usually go with a tent? Do you do the rooftop thing? What are you working with?
Man, I've run, the rooftop tent came from South Africa, came from New Zealand, Australia, that whole thing. And I've run many types of tents. As I get older and my neck gets more decrepit, I like sleeping on the ground now because I could spread out. I can get an air mattress, or I can get a foamy mattress, get more insulation. I've had every rooftop tent. There's not many that have insulation. And I'm a all year round kind of off grid guy. So summertime, it's fine for me to get in a rooftop tent because they breeze really well. But as soon as it starts getting cold, I'm all about insulation. So there's a lot of good insulated tents that you can ground camp and even get a cot to get off the ground. Yeah. I'm more about that life now.
Is there a brand of tent that you prefer for that?
Kelty, Mountain Hardware. Really, all those tents are basically the same. Yeah. They're all made by the same dang Chinese company. Yeah. There are some outliers in the tent space, but I'm basic, man. One of my favorite are the, I like Tepui tents. I like these easy on tents, but one of my favorites are the Kafaru tent setups because you can run like a heater, you could run a fire inside the tent, kind of aluminum based, and then it's basically a tarp. But having that fire and that heat source is magic.
So is that more of like a teepee setup?
It is a teepee setup, yeah, okay. Exactly, yeah.
So it's basically like a dome home with a fucking wood-burning stove in the middle.
That's it, yeah, that's it. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to fucking check into that. I love a rooftop tent. I've got a Maggiolina brand.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Which, I've tried a few different ones. I had a different one that was not very good, but this one has served me well. Similarly, like as I get older, I like to be a little more comfortable than just laying on the fucking ground on a thermarest, if that, like thermarest from your hips to your shoulders and that's it. But the what I like about that, like I replaced the stock mattress with a Tempur-Pedic mattress, pad or cover, which is great as long as it's not freezing cold. Otherwise, it turns into a fucking brick. But, But there's a lot of options. I mean, it feels like sleeping in a regular fucking bed, which I like. I love that thing, and I like being way up off the ground in case something comes fucking creeping and crawling, animal or person. But what in a normal day, what is your daily or your morning routine, provided you're home and not traveling?
So if I'm home, man. So I've been in this grind for about 4 years, and I could rarely think of the circumstance I haven't followed this kind of pattern of life. I get up, If I'm not doing, like this morning, I got up and did an hour run. I'm training for this 50K, so it involves some type of PT, because that's kind of how we rolled in our military careers. Get it done, knocked out of the way.
So you're getting up to like 5:30 or?
No, you know what? I'm not doing the Jocko thing.
Yeah.
I try to set in at least 7 hours. I call it, the solid 7. If I can get 7 hours of sleep, which is super important for me now at my age, cognitively.
Yeah.
With TBI, man, if I don't get sleep, I just start degrading.
Yeah.
I like fasting in the morning. I like getting a run in the morning. I like getting 7 hours of sleep, and then I wake up, get coffee in me, and then I start marketing for Fieldcraft Survival. I look at trends. I look at the news. I just start getting content out there in the world, and then I'll go into my office, and typically it revolves around content, whether that's video on YouTube, our podcast, whatever it may be, it revolves around that. I only train on the weekends. Most people train on the weekends because that's their time off. So we just did a course here in Dallas, Fort Worth, which we're prepped for the course. We're getting our guns and stuff ready. And that's a constant cycle. I mean, we train. I don't train personally. My guys train every single weekend. In 2020, we'll be training. So it varies, but it all revolves around survival and preparedness, the news, and what's going on in the world.
Yeah. In terms of your guys, your team, how big is the team that conducts training and runs seminars, et cetera? How big of a unit do you guys have?
So with about an ODA size, so a dozen dudes. So whether it's subcontracted guys or full-time guys, like I got 5 guys on staff right now. And we just make it happen. Like I got a full-time media guy, got a tactical trainer who's the training director, Raul Martinez. And then I just picked up just hired a guy who, Kevin Owens, he just did a YouTube video this morning. But Kevin Owens, we were snipers together in the Commanders and Extremist Force in the SIF. We grew up, he was a SOTIC, the SOTIC NCOIC, that's the Special Operations Target Interdiction Course, sniper school for us. And then he's the USASOC G8, or he was. He's retired now, and we just picked him up. So we'll be doing long gun stuff as well. Yeah. So about a dozen, give or take, depending on what we got going on.
Yeah, that's a solid fucking crew, no doubt about it. In terms of how you guys, provide, and we'll get further into it, but just kind of a 30,000 or elevator pitch, if you will. Give me the quick synopsis of Fieldcraft.
Fieldcraft Survival, when I started it, we want to cater to people who don't think they need catering to. So my original mission statement was, if I can convince a liberal in the middle of San Francisco, lives in his sky-rise, his condo, to come out and realize that preparedness plays a key role in everybody's life, then I think we're successful. It's easy for us to pick up more conservatives, but I think it's an equal opportunist. Natural disaster, man-made disaster, doesn't care who you are, what color you are, it doesn't matter. So we teach, we train, we provide equipment, we provide resources and content to prepare people for the worst case scenario. That's essentially what we do.
Yeah. I mean, to me, there's nothing about that's not a necessity. I mean, to me, it's like medical stuff or a host of other things that, you're always going to need. And I think it's fucking great. I love that kind of stuff. In terms of your childhood, where are you originally from?
So I was born in Fort Worth, California. My dad was in the Army. We bounced all over the place. My first 4 years of life was in Germany. I lived in Daytona Beach for a period of time with my dad, and then moved to North Carolina for a couple of years with my mom. But I joined the Army very young, like 17. Yeah. So I just bounced up and down the East Coast.
Now, I mean, obviously not having anything to contrast that to, we'll take my childhood as an example. I was born and raised in the same fucking town. I lived in the same house from the time I was, born until I joined the Navy at fucking 17. Slept basically in the same bedroom, like basically a polar opposite. Do you think that growing up that way has shaped a proclivity to join the military and continue that same thing, or do you think that it's at a minimum prepared you to be able to deal with that better? Because I know for me, like, that was a huge fucking culture shock going from that living in that environment where it was like a Leave It to Beaver fucking household in a small rural
Pleasantville,
town in fucking Midwest, going to living out of a fucking sea bag and being all over the world and stuff, it was a shock to the system. Did that seem to prepare you fairly well?
Yeah, I think so. I've found that commonality amongst, people who grow up in the military type of home. As a benefit, it sets you up for that military life where your home is where you rest your head.
Yeah.
But I also think even now it's more of a detriment because I'm setting an anchor and I'm establishing a base of operations at home, but I kind of feel a little antsy. Like I want to move, I want to get something else going. But sometimes in life, when you settle, that's not supposed to happen. I don't think it's supposed to happen. And so for me to stay in one position and call it good, it's kind of weird for me.
Yeah. Well, so I'm curious, but like childhood friends, siblings, hobbies, sports, was that impacted by bouncing all over the fucking place? Were there any sports that you played?
Yeah, I played football, I played baseball. I did a whole bunch of athletics. I played basketball. But if I really think about it, all the people that were included in my life for periods of time, it seemed very temporary.
Yeah.
And I bounced around a lot, man. And it's something that, it's almost like the precursor to social media now where we look at things very temporary because we could just swipe it away, right? So yeah, it did inject something into my mindset where I was okay with walking away from relationships or walking away from friends or walking away from my situation.
Yeah.
But now it just doesn't feel right.
And women love that, by the way.
Oh, they do.
Yeah,
they do.
It's their favorite.
Yeah. Delete block.
Fucking captain commitment issues, right? The element of sports and friends and that being temporary, was there something other than the fact that your dad was in the military, and what did he do in the military?
So my dad he started out as a military police officer, and then he branched, I believe, artillery and then infantry or something like that. And I think, he's being around his TA-50, his military equipment, and that lifestyle is kind of what was the prelude for setting me up for that.
Yeah. Did he work with you at all growing up, like teaching you certain military skills or survival skills or anything? Like, did he plant that bug, or was it something you just had an inclination for?
I think I had an inclination more than anything. I mean, maybe setting me up is put me in front of the TV watching A-Team and Cops and all the, even Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen. I did a lot of that, but my dad was a big fisherman. I grew up probably every day of my life, damn near every day of my life, fishing.
Really?
And so being outdoors, living that lifestyle, that's all we did. I mean, we fished.
Do you have a favorite fish?
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of trout.
Yeah.
I grew up that way, and I grew up in inlets and ponds and streams and everything else. But I'm a big fan of trout just because the variations of trout. Yeah.
The brown trout and the trouser trout specifically.
yeah, that brown trout, man, I love it.
So I guess, from a growing up standpoint, siblings, et cetera, was there, other than, your dad having some sort of a prelude, influence with, was there like a day where you were like, this is what I'm going to do and I want to be a fucking Green Beret?
Yeah. If I think about it, there were some instances. One of the instances that stands out to me is my uncle, my dad's brother, retired out of the Navy. And I remember I watched the movie Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen. And, man, if people underestimate how popular culture affects us as children. And, it obviously it happens today. But back then, it was all about the military.
Yeah.
Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, the Apocalypse Now, the list goes on. And so when I was growing up watching war movies with my dad, because my dad was living vicariously, he had put the military behind him, was doing corrections, and was living vicariously through these movies, I was a part of that segment. And so playing war, wanting to be a soldier was always in me. And I remember asking my uncle if, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And he had kind of a frank discussion with me and said, listen, you could do that, but if you fail, it's not like
you're fucked.
Yeah, you're done, right? You're fucked. It's not like the Army where there's a whole bunch of different combat arms options. Yeah. You'll be, mopping the deck of a carrier or ship. And so I said, so what are the other options? And my dad said, they had a little battle of services, but he was like, just go in the Army, be a special forces guy.
Yeah.
And so I started looking into it. And this is probably at the age of 10 where I made the decision that I was going to be in special forces.
No shit.
Yeah.
You know, the safety net or lack thereof inference is an interesting one to me because you would think that would, for the people that do decide that would motivate them maybe a little further.
Yeah.
Right. Is that, you know, it's the burn the boats mentality of whatever fucking invader that was that landed and said, we're burning our fucking ships, so we have to be successful kind of thing. Is that there's an element of that. I know, like when I was going through BUDS and we're sitting there getting our shit pushed in on the beach by, you know, a handful of instructors, and there's a big gray ship fucking 2 miles out at sea floating around, and you're looking out there and you're like, fuck that, you know.
It's a good incentive.
Yeah, for sure it is. And the fact that it's like, you know, that, hey, if you don't make it through this, like, you're going to be chipping paint on a fucking boat like that because you're an undesignated seaman, which there's a lot of references you can pull from that. Yeah. But, you know, not having, you know, really a fucking plan B or any type of legitimate backup that's not going to just absolutely suck, for me was a huge motivator. I am curious, like going through Ranger School, Q course selection, you know, the whole selection pipeline for you guys, did that ever cross your mind, or did you see guys, you know, that would use that like, well, fuck, I can leave here and go do, you know, whatever, and that actually helped them quit, do you think?
Yeah, I think it enabled or facilitated their checking out, right?
Okay.
I think, you know, in my head, I repeatedly said to myself, I would rather die than quit. Yeah. And I know that's extreme, but when you are living it and you're going through the suck and the pain and everything else, there was nothing that was going to physically break me. Yeah. And you know, I didn't think selections were hard. All these selections, everything weren't hard to me because I knew I more than likely wasn't going to die. Yeah. So as long as I continued to move forward, I would be successful. And I didn't want to create an out for me because I did 4 years in the infantry, went to airborne school, Ranger school, did all this stuff. And then I knew that was an option for me, but I didn't want any more of the big Army. Yeah. I mean, my incentive for, you know, when people ask me about the 18 X-ray program, for example, I tell them, when you're coming off the streets, you don't have an understanding in context of what suffering really is. And for
the choke yourself civilian assholes, can you describe 18 X-ray?
Yeah, so 18 X-ray, it was a program in the 80s and then a program in the modern GWAT, the Global War on Terror, where they're taking and recruiting people off the street based on aptitude, life experience potentially, and they had to meet certain prerequisites. They brought them in. They went through a special operations prep course, put them into selection, then put them into the pipeline. Well, you would get a myriad of personalities and characters, obviously, and they wouldn't have a reference for what the big Army was. And so they were just there and they're like, well, this sucks. I'm like, no, this doesn't suck. Yeah. The big Army sucks. So what I did take away from, you know, having 4 years in the infantry is I didn't want to go back to the big Army because the big Army sucked. Even 18 X-rays who didn't really appreciate what was going on at the time, like, man, this is a good life. Special operations or special forces specifically is a good life. And I didn't want to go back to the big Army life.
So let's talk about a little bit of that. Is that you joined at 17, myself similarly. What was the first 4 years of your career like?
It was good. It wasn't very good in the beginning.
Where did you go to boot camp?
So I went to boot camp at Fort Benning, Georgia, and it's called OSUT, One Stop Unit Training. Immediately went into the Army. I actually went in the Army as 11 X-ray, which is basically the Army chooses your MOS or your specialty based on how they preference it. When I went to basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, they just said, hey, you guys are 11 Bravos, you guys are 11 Charlies, and you guys are 11 Mikes in hotels. And Bravos were light infantrymen, and then it scaled up based on vehicles, heavy armor, and everything else, even mortars. And they made me an 11 hotel. An 11 hotel was a heavy armor or heavy tank anti-armor personnel. So I was an infantryman who drove in a Humvee. Yeah. So I didn't realize this at the time, but I joined the Army to be a Ranger, an airborne Ranger. Except when the Ranger instructors came and roll call to collect all the Ranger students, they didn't pick me up. And I was confused. I said, hey, I have an option 40 contract, which is the contractual obligation to Ranger Regiment. And they didn't pick me up, and they said, oh, there's no 11 hotels in the regiment, the Ranger Regiment. So automatically I started having a fit. I'm like, man, I joined the Army to be a Ranger. I got ripped off. I got the recruiter. And they did. I mean, the recruiter knew that there was a chance of me, only a 25% chance of me getting picked up in a Bravo MOS. Well, I guess 50% because 11 Charlies, which is mortarmen, could have got picked up as well. And so I had a bad taste in my mouth from the get-go. I threw a fit. I called my uncle, who was a sergeant major in 18th Airborne Corps at the time. He made some phone calls, and they came back and said, hey, listen, we're going to send this kid to the 3rd Infantry Regiment, which is the old guard. I didn't even know what the hell that was. And I wasn't very happy about it, but I said, hey, whatever it takes for me to be an 11 Bravo. So I was in basic training in AIT, had already completed training, and a civilian contractor actually came into a room like this, and he had my contract, and he took a pen and he crossed out 11 hotel, and he wrote 11B, 11 Bravo, or basic infantryman, and then he signed his initials. And I was like, what the hell?
Welcome to the Army.
Yeah, I was like, well, you just changed my MOS. He's like, that's your new MOS. Yeah. And so because he did that for me, there was an obligation for me to go to the 3rd Infantry Regiment, the old guard. So I said, all right, Roger, I'll do whatever it takes as long as I get to regiment. So I went to the old guard and didn't even know the hell what it was, and realized I didn't want to be there. They had a scout platoon, thank goodness, and I did that for a little bit. And then my uncle, who was in the infantry, was also a tomb guard. And he said, listen, you have to buy your time there. You have to do good. Go be a tomb guard. And it's not that easy being a tomb guard. So I went and tried out to be a tomb guard. And 9 months later, I was guarding the Tomb of the Unknowns, and would do that until I went to selection.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's the, I saw on your Instagram feed just a few days ago talking about being awarded like the 478th fucking pin out of, or it's only been 400 and some since like 1943. Is that?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I'm real curious, like, as I've never known or talked to anybody that's done that. Obviously, that's a fucking super elite small group of people that have that, feather in their cap. What does the tryout and the training consist of? Like, what is it like?
So when I went through, you raised your hand and said, I want to try out for the Tomb of the Unknowns to be a tomb guard. If you've never been to the Tomb of the Unknowns, it's in Arlington National Cemetery. It's a large crypt. Underneath that crypt is the World War I unknown. So we're talking about an American service member who served their country, our country specifically, at war, and then not only lost their life, but lost their identity. So we're talking about remains that couldn't be identified. We paid homage to that and built a crypt. And then in front of that, we have the World War II, Korea, and Vietnam unknowns as well. And so that's been guarded by the old guard and the Army 24 hours a day since 1948.
Yeah, that's fucking wild. No matter what, right?
No matter what. Yeah. Rain, snow, sleet, or heat, it's been guarded, and I've been through all of them. In ceremonial uniforms during the summertime, the guards changed every 30 minutes, which includes a 7-minute guard change, so about 37 minutes of being out there. Come down for a couple minutes, drink some water, reset, and then go back out there again.
What kind of shift is that, real quick?
So that's
So 30 on and...
Yeah, typically it's like a fireman schedule. You're 24 on, 24 off, on, off, on, and then 4 days off all year round. And then we have 3 shifts or 3 reliefs based on height, first, second, and third. I'm 6'1", so I was on the shorter relief. Then you have second relief, which is about 6'2" to 6'3", and then 6'4" or 6'3" and above is first relief. And that's nonstop. So you go through that process where you go through a 2-week initial assessment period. They say, hey, is this person, because it's open to anybody in the old guard, any MOS, any job, male or female.
Are there women?
There have been women before.
Yeah.
There are a handful of them. But they, again, the overall experience is pretty tough. I think, man, the attrition rate it's harder than being in special operations as far as the tryout period.
Yeah, so I mean, what does one look for? Like when they're what's going to make them say this guy's got what it takes? Fuck off this other guy.
You know, what's interesting is after my tomb guard time as a guard on duty, I was the trainer, so I trained tomb guards for a year, and right before I went SF. So what I look for is composure, discipline, because initially if you have discipline and I'm telling you to correct things and you're fixing those mistakes, then you might have the discipline to last the 7 to 9 months it takes you to get your badge. Because it's an assessment all the way till you get your badge. And then you get assessed even when you have your badge. I also look for your composition. The way you
fat body.
You can't be a fat body. Your waist has to be very small.
The politically correct composition.
Yeah.
You can't be a fat fucking dude.
You can't be fat. Man, my waist was so damn small back then, and we just look for you to be squared away, and that's doing the walk, that's doing the timing for the walk, that's going through the guard change flawlessly. You know, one of the standards that we live by is in the Sentinel's Creed. And it's called line 6 of the Sentinel's Creed. And it says, my standard will remain perfection. So everything we do, you have to be perfect. If you're not perfect, then and not striving for it, but accomplishing it, then you're not good enough to be there.
Yeah. Well, I am curious. I've seen like some, YouTube video clips of, somebody fucking with the tomb guard personnel occasionally or whatever. Did you ever have that happen, or are there any stories you can share of times where, like, I don't know, some drunk guy tries to tackle him or, whatever, like there has to be shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's been, right after the Vietnam War, our country was completely in chaos when it came to the military and our place in war in the 70s and 80s. And there's actually an incident that took place in the 80s where the tomb guard on duty was taken hostage at gunpoint.
No shit.
It's actually noted because we keep an archive of all the guards that walked in the time, and we have that as a source of reference. But we also note significant activity that took place. And there has been a guard that's been taken hostage. He winded up like butt stroking the dude, and the cops came and arrested him. I've had people come onto the plaza, which is the place in which is guarded and protected by chains. You can't come on there and walk there, but there's thousands of people from different countries that come there every single day. And I've had people cross the chains completely oblivious to what the hell is going on. Talking as loud as they could talk, walking straight up to the tomb, which is the actual crypt, and trying to touch it, which is a no-go.
And so what is your protocol when that happens?
Usually we go to a ceremonial position where we're at port arms. So we're holding the gun, and then we start movement towards them to defend the Tomb of the Unknowns, trying to maintain composure. And we say something, it's called breaking somebody off. We usually say, access to this area is restricted, or it is requested that everyone remain silent and standing if somebody's being loud. And we have a little guard shack, and we have a phone. And then we have, people that could QRF in seconds that could run up and stop an unsafe act. And we also have cameras that are watching the tomb 24 hours a day. Yeah.
So there's one guy or one, personnel standing there guarding it. Is there somebody manning the shack also?
No, the shack is for the guard. So we have the mat in front. You'd walk 21 steps, face Washington, D.C., count 21 seconds, and kind of repeat that process until the changing of the guard, which is kind of the famous version of what people typically see. And then the guard shack, there's a small box with a bottle of water to spray your white gloves so you could handle the gun. There's also a mirror in the corner, tucked in the corner, so you could check yourself to make sure you're squared away.
Tighten up the shave.
Tighten up everything. Yeah, there are guys who have to do that.
That's fucking.
And then there's a phone that goes straight down to the headquarters.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Like I had no idea that you did that, and it's just I've never met anybody that's done it. It's kind of a almost a mythical job. Like I don't even know anybody that's known anybody that's done it. Is that something that because I know in the SEAL teams, if there was an equivalent, having that in your resume and then showing up to the polar opposite, like they had to have fucked with you at least a little bit, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
We have something called, the guard change. You have the weapons inspection.
Yeah.
And so you take a full size M14 and you manipulate it with a bayonet. And so when I went to Special Forces as an 18 Bravo, Special Forces weapons specialist, and we got to the M14, one of my guys who was the instructor was in the old guard. And he said, Mike, grab it, and I'll show everybody the weapons inspection. And I'll post that today as a throwback.
That's fucking great.
I'll post it today just to show it. But that weapons inspection, man, every place I go, I keep it on the DL in that community because they do fuck with me a lot.
I know, having been an instructor, I have to ask, how many times did instructors say, do the walk? Did they make you do it in front of everybody?
A dozen times.
Yeah, at least.
A dozen times. It makes me good shooting and moving, though. I can float my feet and keep the gun stable.
Oh, it's fucking hilarious. You ought to do a smart-ass YouTube video where you're shooting and doing that fucking thing. It'd be great. All right, so you did Old Guard and that for basically a 4-year period, and then at that point you were given the shot to go to regiment. Yeah,
well, so I made rank really fast. From 17 to 20, I got my expert infantry badge, which is precursor for being squared away in the infantry. I went to airborne school, went to ranger school, got my tune badge, and I made sergeant at the age of 20. And this is all prior to 9/11. Then 9/11 happens. And immediately I'm fighting to go to selection. And right after that, I went to selection. I went to selection in 2002 after the GWAT, or when the GWAT kicked off. And then from there on was in Special Forces.
And I would, for the listener, because overwhelmingly I've had mostly SEALs as far as military background guests. I would love to kind of get your take on, having worked with a lot of SEALs and knowing pretty intimately what our process is like. Could you kind of highlight the differences between, what the Q course selection is and your guys' pipeline versus what you know about ours?
Yeah, there's a definitive difference, right? There's a huge difference in the two. SEALs are considered operators in their service, and there's no other options really for combat-driven MOSs, frontline MOSs in the Navy. So you're it. You're a special operator for your service, your branch. Well, in the Army, most guys who try out for Special Forces have been some way, somehow, typically affiliated with combat arms, meaning a job that's on the front lines, whether that's combat engineer, combat medic, infantrymen, and the list goes on. You could even have guys that are, Ranger Battalion, snipers, and RRD, one of the most elite units in the Army, come try out to be a Green Beret. And one of the distinct differences is the SEAL teams and SEAL specifically focus on direct action operations, which includes special reconnaissance, DA, and the list goes on. We have something that has become, it's always been part of what you guys do as well, but we have a real hard focus academically and practically in our training for foreign internal defense, which is training indigenous personnel, right? So we have things like outside of small unit tactics, we have things like Robin Sage, where we have this like fake little world of recruiting and assessing and then training and then operating with an indigenous host nation force. So I think that's a big difference is culturally, at least initially, you had to understand language, you had to understand the terrain that you're operating in, and then work unconventional warfare, which could mean training personnel to have access and placement to do operations, as opposed to just kicking indoors. Now that's changed because of the environments that we find ourselves in, like Africa, for example, where you guys have always trained in South America and Africa and all over the world. Now it's becoming, for every special operations unit, more of a demand to be trained to train somebody else in different countries.
That's one of the things we did on a number of occasions, the foreign internal defense and training different groups. And I know for us, and I'm curious because you guys kind of specialize in that quite a bit more than we do, is there I guess what I would call kind of a general understanding with you guys in terms of, yes, we're teaching host nation, but you're not giving them the fucking playbook. You know, like it's a measured amount of training.
Yeah. Most of our POIs or periods of instruction that are taught to indigenous forces are typically approved through a concept of operations approval process. So meaning I can't just go out and just teach whatever I want to teach.
Yeah.
We have to teach specific things based on the mission, and that could be accelerated depending on what we're trying to accomplish at the end of it. Like I've ran counterterrorism training operations where we had to train and then operate with these guys, and you know, it would be anything from basic small unit tactics to basic CQB to all the way to advanced things, depending on the relationship that our country had with that host nation.
Yeah. You know, history tells us that going too far above and beyond what the bare minimum is just flat out a fucking mistake. You know, obviously you don't want, if they're guys, you know, operating with us, you want them at least squared away enough to where they're not an enormous liability, which some of them are, irrespective of how much time you put in. But did you ever have instances where, you know, that kind of came back to bite you in the ass of working with those guys?
Man, you know, it's not very, it's predictable, but it's not very apparent. It's probably happened every single time. I mean, let's be honest. We're training in foreign countries, people who grow up in dirt. You know, they're dirt farmers. They live in dirt. They have no running water, electricity, and they're going to cater to the highest incentive. You know, if somebody comes across and is like, "Hey, man, we'll pay you more, or we'll do whatever," patriotism and nationalism isn't really instilled even in those cultures. It's very tribal. So, you know, who's to say? I think one of the things I always fought for, even against high-level chains of commands, even as a sergeant major, that I fought for, is we are overcomplicating an easy process. I don't need to teach these guys CrossFit. I don't need to run advanced free-flow CQB. I just need to get enough of them taught to safely fire maneuver on an objective where bad guys are, and that's enough for me. Yeah. And that was a constant struggle for us.
Is there a funniest story that you have? I'm sure you've seen that video of trying to do fucking jumping jacks in Iraq. Have you seen that?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like, I mean, I can watch that 1,000 times and still laugh my ass off. Do you have a similar, like, this one time we were working with X and this happened? That
I was in Libya running a 12-weight program, which is, for people who don't know what that is, it's nothing classified. You can Google it. It's a congressionally mandated counterterrorism program that's congressionally approved and financed to basically take a host nation that needs help fighting Al-Qaeda, training them up, supporting them, and then combat advising them on the battlefield. I was running this program, and SOCAF, Special Operations Command Africa, would not get off their ass, which is common to the command. They've since, I think, improved. I mean, I hope they've improved. It's been a decade. But when we got there, we didn't have anything. And they wanted us to do a capability exercise. And they wanted us to have generals and colonels and high levels of chains of command on site to observe. And I said, listen, you guys haven't provided guns or bullets, and you want me to do it. I could air gun it. And they're like, what do you mean air gun it? I was like, what do you want me to do to demonstrate our tactical capability in conducting a raid if I don't have guns?
Bust out the M16.
That's what we did. Yeah, there we go. So there's a whole bunch of palms, obviously being off the Mediterranean. And they thought I was joking, but I had no other option. So I said, everybody, go get a palm tree. Go start breaking off limbs off palms and choose your weapon system. So
to me, this highlights me being a smartass was actually what really happened. Mm-hmm. So if that tells you anything.
Exactly. So we did a whole entire, it called mod demo, demonstrating our capabilities with sticks. I even had guys who had like pine cone style pieces of woods in their pockets as grenades and flashbangs that were using them.
Great.
And I'm like, dude, this is where we are in counterterrorism
like
right
you're
now.
10 years old in the fucking treehouse playing war.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah. What year was it? Like 02 when you went to selection?
02 when I went to selection, and then straight to the Q course right after that.
And so from there until or I guess if you could kind of highlight your time as a Green Beret, a number of deployments where you went kind of chronologic.
Yeah, so I got into SF. I deployed to Afghanistan for 9 months. I was in a remote fire base in 04, 05. I was actually part of Operation Redwings.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, I was in Charlie Company's 2nd Battalion, so we owned all the fire bases from, Bagram all the way up to Naray, which was the fire base that I was in. So, below us was Asadabad and Jalalabad, and 3 of our teams deployed to rescue Marcus Luttrell, and then my team sat on an airfield for a week during the whole thing that was going on. And I spent 9 months in just a small fire base in the middle of Afghanistan during that.
During that time, when he was on E&E and subsequently, what was the morale and feeling like of you guys being over there while that happened?
It was tough. I remember every little bit of it. I was a young staff sergeant, Green Beret. We were getting rocketed and attacked almost nightly. It was pretty chaotic. That year was a bad year for everybody in special operations, including the Navy. I was the guy who was going back as the 18 Bravo because I ran indigenous guys at the time. So I had to go back and get cash to pay these guys.
How much did you skim off the top?
Just 10%. I looked at it and went like 10% is a safe number.
Yeah. It's like the tithe, right? Yeah. It's like going to church. Give me 10. Yeah.
Going back and forth and everything, and we lost. I remember the week that I infilled, we had a Chinook hit with 107s, killed 3 guys on the ground. We lost 3 Chinooks that time period, including the one from the Navy, the MH-47. We lost the Chinook on one of our ops, the MH-47. So it was just a hectic year. And when that kicked off, I was on radio guard at the talk in our fire base. We had 15 to 20 Americans with about 100 Afghans in the middle of nowhere. And they started letting us know that things were going down. We prepped our equipment, preparing to roll out. The initial QRF, they basically gathered everybody at Camp Vance and said, we're going. So a lot of guys just went. And then we responded by assisting those guys. And I remember hearing the initial movement. One movement was going to recover the MH-47. Another unit or element was going to recover Marcus Luttrell. And I felt helpless being in the situation I was. I knew we had a task and purpose, which was sitting on an HLZ, standing by to assist them because if they needed reinforcements. But I hated hearing the struggle that was going on and not being a part of it because, if you've never heard the story, even with the body recoveries, when they infilled, they ran out of food, they ran out of water, they were doing CDS bundle drops. That terrain was brutal. I mean, I was in the middle of the Hindu Kush at 10,000 feet, and we couldn't move anywhere without elevating. It's not like we were getting any low ground there. So it was a sombering feeling. And when the bird went down, we knew it went down. And then we knew when we had 2 teams that went in with the Rangers to rescue Luttrell. Both of them noted in his book. I think one of them he called like a black, an African-American medic, Ranger medic, was actually one of my buddies that was on the scuba team. He also noted one of the commanders that was head of the Rangers. He was actually a Green Beret, and his name's Kent. He was in charge of the ground force. He was the ground force commander of the organization that went in to physically extract him. But yeah, it was sombering to say the least.
Well, and at least as far as I am aware, when that helo went down, like it kind of hit a cliff and fucking rolled, right? So I mean, it was in an area that was almost fucking impossible to get to, right? It was
going to set it. Guys were on ropes when it got hit with our RPG. They know that because some of the guys that came off the rope were intact. They weren't devastated by the crash.
No shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there were some guys that were intact. So they basically fell out of the bird. And then when it got hit, then this is just what I was told. This is partly hearsay. I've seen the pictures and the videos and everything else. But then he attempted to gain elevation and set it down on a ridge line, clipped the top of the ridge line, and then it crashed in the side of the mountain and then rolled all the way down.
So there were guys suspended from the helo when it got hit.
Yep.
So what did they fall off of the rope then, or how?
Yeah, that's what they think, because they had ropes out, and some of the guys fell off the rope right as it was hit with an RPG, a lone RPG gunner. Yeah.
Man, I did not know that.
Yeah.
That is some wild shit. After that, the following, how many months were you in country after that?
After that happened, man, 4 more months.
So in that 4-month period, was there a retribution time period where you guys were like, all right, motherfuckers, and
Yeah,
the gloves are coming off?
There absolutely was. We were involved in a big operation in Kotya Valley, which is it's a terrorist safe haven. We pushed through the valley. We had Marines providing artillery support. I was calling for fire. We had Apaches going Winchester on the ridge lines. That's when we had the MH-47 that inadvertently crashed, and we had to drop a JDAM on it. But in addition to that, we recovered some propaganda from the bad guys' perspective of the videos that were taking from the bad guys' perspective of the assault on the Littrell's team. So we were able to extract some of that during SSEs.
Was there anything that surprised you, or that you didn't think happened or didn't know that happened, that from their vantage point either disproved after action or just shed more light that's not more commonly known?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Like Marcus got debriefed before we even left country. It was distroed to all. We had his debrief. And the debrief of I think it was JPR8, the guys who do joint personnel recovery, sent out a blast to everybody. And there's a whole bunch of things that happen, some of it which isn't communicated, which isn't talked about. But I think, if I thought about something that stood out the most, our company was tasked with doing that operation. We had a Halo team that was in Asadabad. It was 6-4, which is 364, which is our Halo team in our company, a part of Third Group company. And I was on 366, the mountain team. The sergeant, or the team sergeant of that detachment, turned down that op, and it was with 12 guys, and said, "Hey, we're not gonna do this op. There's too many people in there." And obviously, as the story goes, they SDV Team 10 went in there with 4 guys, and I don't ever want to be in a position to criticize guys that aren't here. It was a bad situation to begin with, because you had a whole bunch of guys. And reconnaissance, I grew up in recce. That's really what I did my entire career, was special reconnaissance. And I just get sick thinking about those men, Mike Murphy and Dietz and all those guys fighting for their lives in that circumstance, getting overwhelmed. And I think a whole bunch of mistakes were made on all ends that need to be talked about in the right context, which probably isn't even this conversation, to help military decision makers and tactical guys on the ground to not make those mistakes in the future. And I think a lot of that came out, especially when it came to providing support for even the guys on the ground. I mean, how do you provide support for 150 militants that are attacking 4 guys? There needs to be something on paper and then in the air. Yeah. And a lot of those mechanisms weren't in place.
Do you think that the Department of Defense has done an adequate job of reducing that to a lessons learned and distributing it so that that those mistakes aren't made?
No, not at all.
That's good news.
Yeah, there's not a lot of crosstalk. I mean, I teach my guys as much as I know, and I've done that since that incident happened. But there's, it's so bizarre to me, because SEAL Team 10 was right next door to us. There was no cross communication between Camp Vance and SEAL Team 10 right down the road. And what we were doing and operating on. I didn't experience that until later in war, when we started doing joint operations. But it's like, even the QRF was a hodgepodge of people that they could gather. They were like, "Hey, you're in the Army. You want to go on this QRF? Hey, it should have been designated." Yeah. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of lessons learned. Marcus outlined a lot of those in the book and the conversations that he's had thus. But I think we need to always do a better job at talking about even the worst circumstances to better our chances in survival.
Yeah. Amen on that. In terms of the retribution ops, is there any ops that you can share that gave you guys a sense of retaliation that like legit, like tangible, like this is what we did and this is what we accomplished?
Yeah, our whole entire company, we had a whole company of 6 detachments on the border. Every single one of those teams and their area of operation went out and were smacking bad guys, including us in the Cocha Valley. So from the Army's perspective, specifically 3rd Special Forces Group, we did a lot of killing to make up the best we could to get some vengeance and some justice for those men that were killed.
Yeah. Did you guys lose anybody on that 9 month?
We did. He wasn't in my company. We did lose a guy. He was killed in an IED. We had a whole bunch of dudes shot and injured. But as far as my company and 6 detachments, we fared pretty well that rotation.
Yeah. Were at that time and where you guys were at, were IEDs a huge fucking problem?
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big reason why we didn't. I mean, I rolled up and down our valley, which was considered Konar Valley, up and down the Konar River, 1 MSR, 1 main supply route up and down north-south that ran along the river, and we never got IED. And the reason we didn't is because the TTP wasn't implemented in that AO during that time period. And we got lucky. I was driving around in an open, cut, and fabricated Land Rover.
No shit.
Yeah, Defender 110 that was cut and fabricated for operating in that terrain because we couldn't have a Hummer that was up-armored Humvee because we couldn't cross bridges. It was too damn heavy.
Do you wish you had a Toyota Land Rover in that environment?
I wish I had anything Toyota in that environment.
Those Hiluxes are badass.
Hiluxes are amazing.
I don't know why they don't fucking sell them here. It drives me nuts.
Some of our sister teams were rolling Hiluxes because of the mountains and what we were surrounded by. We couldn't get guns up, and so we just cut off the roof of our Defender 110s. And, the Land Rovers are great, but they're just pieces of shit. And so we had constantly work on them. But, yeah, man, if we could have had Land Cruisers there, it would have been a game changer for us.
So Land Rover and in that AO are the best pieces of shit out there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the best we had, the best shit we had.
Yeah. All right, so you come back off of that deployment, and then you did, was it 3 more?
So I did. So I came off that deployment, immediately went to Iraq in 06, went to Iraq in 07, went to Iraq in 08, went to Iraq in 09, back to Afghanistan in 10, and then Libya in 11, 12.
Jesus Christ. So you barely did anything then?
Barely. Yeah. Barely.
If you could, what is the simplest way to contrast Afghanistan to Iraq from a special operations standpoint in how we operate?
I would say, Iraq's an urban clusterfuck. It's just a big urban sprawl that has sparse rural environments where you can get lucky in a safe house and kill a whole bunch of bad guys. But it's congested and can be a nightmare for close quarters combat and war versus Afghanistan, which is really tribal, really rural. And you could end up in instances fighting in terrain that you're not prepared for. Yeah. I mean, I've landed on ridge lines in Afghanistan where after the helicopter landed and we looked up, it's like a vertical, incline. And you're like, how am I even I can't even crawl up this thing, and let alone I'm in kit. So the contrast in kit and mission planning and how you operate in that terrain, completely different.
Do you see one as being more dangerous, or, if you had to pick, like, I'd rather operate here than there, is there one, or they just both fucking have their own set of circumstances?
Yeah, I think they're both dangerous in their special ways. I would say in an urban environment, like I did a lot of fighting in Solder City and going, breaching through the wall in Solder City, which was surrounded by a wall at the time that I was there, was like going into a war game. Yeah. It's like, hey, we're initiating, and it's like, here we go, let's kick it off. Versus in rural environments in Afghanistan, you never know what you're going to get. I mean, it was truly, my trips to Afghanistan were truly the Wild West.
Yeah. Was there times while you were there where you guys did shit? There's a lot of stuff in the news with some of our guys, and there has been, with Marines, pissing on corpses, and I mean, there's been certain instances where being in Afghanistan, where it's, in your words, the Wild West, were there instances during that time where you guys ran into problems like that, or were the ROEs such that you guys managed to kind of keep your nose clean?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I fought in Iraq in I would say the prime of the GWOT, which for me is 06, 07, and maybe a little bit of 08. It started to change in 08. We had gloves off. I mean, we would go into Sadr City and it was a kill-free zone. Like, kill everybody who's moving. And the rules of engagement covered that. It was just kill any middle-aged male who's up and out. You have the cleared hot. Versus when they started closing it down and it was hard to discriminate. Now you're like, there's a guy maneuvering or is he just running? Like, there's a guy walking. Is he doing a recce or is he just walking down the street? And so you went from like a non-permissive environment where everybody gets it versus a semi-permissive environment where you have to distinguish and discriminate yourself. And that's where I truly saw the individual disciplines of individual counterterrorism units and their abilities to enact success on targets.
Did any of them surprise you, good or bad, in that respect?
Counterterrorism units specifically? Yeah,
I mean, were there some units where you're like, fuck, I thought you guys were better than that? Or like, wow, you guys are fucking more impressive than I anticipated?
Yeah, I've worked with the Navy a lot downrange, and they were good at discrimination, even the younger teams.
That sounds terrible, by the way.
Yeah. They were young teams. And then there was other elements of the Navy that were smacking and killing every single, like the kill statistics every single night, which we tracked every night. And it was a competition back then. It was like, who's killing the most bad guys? I can't even imagine being a middle-aged male in those houses during that time period. Because if you were a middle-aged male in a safe house, you were getting it. And at that time period, it was appropriate.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know the 06 especially, but 06 to 08, like that 2-year window was just.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it was fucking brutal.
It was crazy.
There.
It was crazy, man.
Did you spend any time in the Triangle, or were you always in Baghdad, Sadr City?
We did flyaways. We did flyaways up there, and then we were all over the place, but we did flyaways all over the country. And when I think back, especially 06 and 07, it was nothing but halves, like helicopter assaults, and half the time I didn't, because I was just a nug assaulter on the team, breacher, and then a sniper. I didn't know what the hell was going on as far as here's your puck card, here's the bad guys, and here's the SSC card. Go kill bad guys. And I kind of like living in that little bubble, where it was kind of like a game in the sense it was a different subset of structures and characters, but we were getting different looks and takes at it every single time.
Yeah. Were there any instances during that period where you guys went on an assault and it just completely went to shit and you got your ass handed to you?
Yeah. I was talking to you a little bit before about we had this objective. It was Objective Ladonia, and it was a foreign safe house. We were out, I believe, on the Syrian border. I can't even remember. It was like northwest. And we had tracked on ISR, which is, basically looking from the plane's perspective, all the patterns of life and activity. And there was only a few people on the objective coming and going. So we're like, okay, there's foreign fighters. They're definitely armed. Let's go hit the safe house. And we start flying towards the objective. And right before we infill, we were doing offsets at that time period, which is landing 2 to 3K or kilometers from the target, and then surreptitiously approaching the objective to contain it and then do a call out. We started call outs in 07 with task force, a joint task force, because Al-Qaeda was getting smart. They were shooting assaulters in the face because they were barricading PKMs recessed in the back of the house. So we went to infill, and we were on MH-40 or MH-60s. So we're in Blackhawks, feet out, open doors, flying with the 160th. And we have Little Birds supporting us, AH-6s, the Little Birds. And we're running a couple Little Birds with people on them, which are MH-6s. And before we go to infill, we take a strafe of anti-aircraft fire between the helicopters. And my brain's not registering what the hell's going on. I'm like, wait a minute, those are tracer rounds coming towards us. Because I'm thinking like it's the little bird or whatever. It's a Dishka being shot at us as we're infilling. Immediately, the little bird peels off and kills 6 dudes at the intersection. That was essentially an early warning to the objective that we were going to.
And they were the ones shooting?
They were the ones shooting out of helicopters. We, the little bird pilots, which are the best pilots in the military, evaporated those dudes off the planet in less than seconds on infiltration. And we still had 2 kilometers to go. So we start walking. We know we're compromised. We're still watching the objective. And I'm thinking it's quiet. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they didn't get tipped off, but they were prepared for us. And it wasn't 3. It was over a dozen. Foreign fighters from Libya that were trained, chest rigs, suicide vests, the whole 9. They even had a barricaded PKM in the house at the front door. They had a V-bid sitting inside the carport. It kicked off pretty epic like.
So knowing, that that's basically the hornet's nest that you're kicking over, ROE-wise, was this one of those situations where the safe house is kind of isolated out in the middle of nowhere? I think, for non-military folks, or even if you were an operator or whatever, is that obviously it's way easier to sit here on our fat asses and say, well, why didn't you do this? It's like, well, fuck, why didn't you pick the winning lottery numbers last night? But, from an ROE standpoint, if it is an isolated area like that, you take that heavy a contact coming in, is the potential for just bombing the shit out of that, like softening it up or just leveling it, not an option?
Yeah, it completely was an option. In fact, based on the ROE, the rules of engagement for calling people out of the objective, that was always a second and third order option after we initiated call out. Because, we're going against Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is bringing in foreign fighters who are trained in Libya, in the Green Mountains of Libya, coming across and then killing Americans. So for us, if we soft knocked the house and they didn't come out, but we knew they were in there, we had the option of pulling away and dropping the JDAM and killing everybody. In this instance, I think we had to determine that, and we have yet to determine that in setting containment. So at a minimum, it's like set containment and see what you can get, because we're tracking several HVTs that are there, which are valuable in sensitive site exploitation of providing information to lead to other bad guys, which we did get a lot of SSE off that objective.
Yeah. Can you walk us through once you landed and started to fucking get into it, how that all went down?
Yeah. So at the time I was a sniper assigned to the Commander's In Extremis Force. We're working for a joint task force, which is JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. We get there, we get on target, we get containment set. And, this is a rural environment. This is like a farmer's house in the middle of nowhere. But that farmer's house had been turned into a safe house. And for people who don't know what safe houses are, they're basically logistical Airbnbs that provide support to all the terrorist networks that cycle through.
It's a T Airbnb, right?
T Airbnb.
Terrorist Airbnb.
Man, we should start. There's got to be some business in that.
There has to be something.
Man. So you could basically get through a network of homes to provide logistical support, whether that's bedding down and sleeping, food, information, to conduct operations out of. So all these guys were nested. We poked the hornet's nest. I don't even think we didn't even initiate it. They discovered that we were out there. The problem for us is we were in an open field. We're in a cornfield, standing up with night vision and lasers with air support offset from us because they didn't want to burn the objective. But we have gunships above us that are watching the objective and illuminating things on the objective that stood out, like movement, like heat. And right when we set up, I remember this, right when we set containment, I'm on like the west side of the objective, and immediately 3 guys come out. And I open fire on these 3 dudes with my little part of the, we'll call it the wagon wheel. We start shooting. And as we start shooting, we're like, oh man, maybe this is just a standard thing and these guys don't have their shit together. As soon as we start shooting, all hell breaks loose. So gunfire breaks loose. It's coming both ways. We start advancing. The machine gunner opens up. I start advancing to a berm. We're in a gunfight. I'm in a grenade fight. I'm throwing grenades at bad guys. Bad guys are chucking grenades.
Are you using the 2-pound fucking pineapple one, or were you using the little golf ball?
The golf. We had the M67s, the round balls. But I also had these little pineapple minis, these little poppers.
You can actually throw further than 20 feet.
That you can chuck. And so I think I went through 3 personal grenades, and I stole 3 grenades from my new guys because they're on the berm. I had one new guy.
Spanker, give me some grenades.
Dude, I had one new guy sitting next to me, and he knows who he is, and I won't call him out, but he was sitting next to me, and he actually asked me in the middle of this gunfight, he goes, "Hey, man, can I throw this grenade?" And in the middle of this fight, I'm like, "Don't ask me if you can throw the grenade. Throw the damn grenade." So he pulls the pin. He calls frag out. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, "You didn't pull the thumb latch, did you? You didn't even pull the thumb latch. You got the safety on there." And he's like, "Shit."
You're like, "All right, go get it. Bring it
well,
back."
I'm like, "Give me your grenades." I took his grenades. And so I chucked 6 grenades on that. But one of the grenades I chucked in the middle of this gunfight, some other dude took credit for it, but I'll take credit for it. Landed in between 3 of the guys, blew one of the legs off. I actually looked up and saw his leg spinning in the air. I was like, I think I just blew that dude's leg off. We found it later. I actually took a picture of it. I'm like, yeah, it was crazy.
You'll post that on Instagram.
I'll post that. Yeah, I actually have posted that.
No shit.
And they didn't take it away.
Take it down, huh?
Well, what I said was, Instagram took this down before, but this is just a picture of my leg to highlight the story. And it's a severed leg sitting on the thing. But this gunfight goes on, and it's the first time in my military career there was a lot of lessons learned off this objective. One is that we set containment after we got in the gunfight. We broke that containment. That lessons learned came back from us from the command sergeant major that was in charge of the JSOC organization at the time, the task force at the time. But we pulled back and we started dropping 105s that were air bursting over the objective. No, actually, I take that back. We started dropping 105s, period, that the C-130 Spectre gunship went Winchester on. He ran out of ammo. But these 105s were breaking into the mud of the ground and exploding and detonating below the ground. Unbeknownst to us, we didn't know that was taking place. And there was a whole bunch of dead dudes all over the objective. We started moving across the objective, and I specifically remember walking with one of my mates, and we were just shooting these dudes while we were moving to our limit of advance. And we had to do that because all of them had rig vest on their chest. I mean, EOD was it's an EOD treasure trove. I was going to say nightmare. They loved doing it.
Yeah.
But as we got across the objective, one of the gunships sparkled a hot spot right in front of me. And I was with another assaulter. His name's Rob, good dude, sitting next to me. And he illuminated this spot. And I was going to actually shoot. I was going to shoot my gun. And I had suppressed carbine. And Rob's like, no, back up. So we started backing up. And thank God he told me to do that, because it was a person that was laying inside. And I thought it was a body. So I was like, I'll just start shooting. But we were in reeds. And if you're in Iraq or even Afghanistan, reeds bleed off lasers. So it cuts it and it sprawls it. That's why the bad guys hide in their palm groves, because it's hard for lasers to penetrate that. So I backed up, and then our dog handler, Rick, brought up our dog, Vinny, and it was a task force dog. The dog didn't belong to our unit. And he was a Belgian Mal, a beautiful Mal. We kept him muzzled around the
So he was super social.
The operators, but he was a good dog, man. We love Vinny. And Vinny came up in front of me and Rob, and he said, "Hey, where's it at?" And the gunship sparkled the hot spot. So he ran out and he let him off the leash, and he started jumping around and sniffing around. And I remember at one point looked to Rick and said, "Hey, man, I don't think he's going to get anything." Kind of being impatient. And he said, "Hey, man, he's doing something," right? Which told me that he understood his behavior and his movement and emotions.
And then you heard some screaming.
Then he basically told me, "Shut the fuck up." I was like, "Roger that."
Yeah.
And then I saw Vinny almost pounce like a fox, like he was going into a hole to get out prey. He jumps up, he pounces down, and I hear a struggle. Then I hear a gunshot. Then I hear Vinny cry. Then I hear an explosion. And I didn't, it took me a while to figure that out. And then looking with ISR what actually happened, it was confusing to me. But essentially, the guy more than likely had a pistol or a rifle, shot and then detonated his vest. His vest low ordered because it blew up, but it killed Vinny instantly. And Vinny was intact, so it wasn't a complete explosion. It might have been even a low order grenade, but it messed the dude up too. So when that happened, we heard Vinny cry, and me and Rob instantly started moving towards Vinny. I remember Rick grabbing us and pulling us back, and he had been through this before. He was an experienced dog handler, operator, and he pulled us back and he said, "Hey man, that's what he's there for. Do not go over there. Do not risk your life." So we backed up, and it was devastating, man, because it was, I'd lost guys in my units before, and those were always devastating. But the fact that we couldn't do anything about him, rescue him or do anything for him, really stuck with me. So we pulled back, and then the commander at that point decided we're going to devastate and level this entire place. So we came in with another gunship, and we 105 airbursted the rounds all over the objective and killed and decimated everything that was a hot spot. And, long story short, we eventually went across the objective, found Vinny, recovered Vinny intact, and brought him back. And I'll never forget, we loaded up the aircraft, it was daylight. While we were decimating the target, I'll never forget standing in the open field, brass from the 7.62 from the miniguns, running down all over our heads.
It's fucking raining.
The raining brass, because they use us as a target mark to start their gun run. So they see us, come straight up, dump brass on us, do their gun run with 6 guns, including 2.75-inch rockets. They went Winchester. They pulled off. Daylight was coming up. The whole objective was on fire. We loaded up, recovered Vinny, put an American flag on him. And I'll never forget, Vinny was behind me on the bird, and Rick was in tears. And, we're looking down. The sun's coming up over Baghdad. And I'll never forget, coming into the HLZ, 160th doesn't land helicopters like you land helicopters. They land them like airplanes. So we came in hot. We turned and peeled. And I remember looking down between my legs. I've had blood all over my shoes from bad guys and everything else. And I look down and I see all these big Army dudes and Army PTs holding their chow plates because they went to the chow hall, and they're just looking up with a road guard vest on going, holy shit, who the hell are these guys? And then landing, the whole task force met us, so they came out of their billets, the most elite operators in the world. We're talking, Dev, unit, every JSOT, Rangers, the Brits. This is Task Force 16 at the time, so it's everybody under Stanley McChrystal. And they all saluted as we pulled Vinny's body off off the helicopter. And everybody was teared up then. We went back to our huts, took showers, and the whole cycle started the next day, man.
I'll tell you, I appreciate you sharing that story. It's mind-bogglingly awesome to hear, the use of dogs in a nature which, I'm sure for many of you listening right now, you think, holy fuck, like you sent him on a suicide mission. Realize, just like what the handler said, is that, we all meaning the canine industry, we do what we do because we love dogs and love, the capability that they bring to the table. Having said that, stories like that, I think, just really highlight how valuable they are, and for lack of better terms, how precious they are in terms of, that selfless, albeit naive sacrifice on their part, because rest assured, there's not a genuine understanding of the inherent danger that's involved in what's taken place. But for those of you that have never caught a dog or worked a dog that is the type of dog that needs to be muzzled around, its operators, there is no question in your mind once you see them work is that is what they are absolutely fucking hardwired to do, is to just go find people and fucking devastate them, you know. And when you see a dog that's built that way, that's bred that way, that's, their genes are hardwired, they've been raised right, they've been trained right, going and doing things like that, and without a doubt saved probably a couple of your guys' lives. That's what it's all about. And it just, again, it just continues to, resonate with me. And I know a lot of the listeners here in Canine Stories. I appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah, thank you.
So at that time you were still, just with, with the Green Berets at that time, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about once you finished there and went on to the subsequent unit? How much of that can you share?
Yeah. So I went to USASOC HQ to the unit for a few years. Did a job in technical reconnaissance for a few years. Had 2 more combat rotations with them. Made E8 at 30 years old. I mean, I made E8 pretty young, and had a opportunity to leave the unit, the organization, and stand up a new SIF company. I was given that opportunity by Bob Irby, who's, if people are listening to this and they know SF guys and they've been around the community, they know who Bob Irby is. But Bob Irby was standing up the AFRICOM SIF out of the unit. So he was standing it up because Africa was falling apart. He saw it falling apart. He was designated by the 10th Group Commander to stand it up. I was on a recruiting trip for the unit, and he approached me and said, "Hey, man, I know you're a recce guy, a reconnaissance guy." At that time, I had been a sniper, I've been free fall, all the requirements for a sniper and a recce guy. I had met, and then I had been a recon NCO, which was my title, reconnaissance NCO in the organization. He said, "Hey, would you like to come out, and would you like to stand up the SIF company?" And the opportunity to stand up a SIF company from scratch, utilizing, JSOC and all its entities and having free reign, was an amazing opportunity for me. So I said, absolutely. I think people have asked me before, like, wouldn't you want to just stay in the organization? I left the organization. A lot of people don't leave the organization on good terms. I left the organization on good terms.
Do you mean almost like it's a bit of a mafia that way, and that once you're in, you either fucking die, retire, or like if you leave prior to one of those 2 things, it's usually not for good reason.
100%. And what people don't realize about that specific organization is you can't leave there and not have people knowing why you left.
Yeah.
And I'll just talk about this process. When you leave, you talk to a psych, and then your troop commander makes a recommendation whether or not you could come back, and then your status in the organization based off of whatever the conditions are.
Is that status like green, red, or blue ball, black ball?
Absolutely is. It's like P&G, never fucking come back, piece of shit, and it's one piece of paper.
Yeah.
And this psychologist, because psychologist is evaluating whether or not you're going to come and just dump secrets all over. I don't want to get P&G'd from the unit. That's why I'm saying this out loud, that I didn't leave on bad terms. My troop sergeant major said, in fact, it's rare that you could read the recommendation, but I read mine, and it said would make a great troop sergeant major in the future.
Which is way better than would make a great neighbor.
yeah, exactly. So when that piece of paper is on you. So even when guys vet me from that organization, they go back, get that piece of paper, they can reference that. And that was important to me.
Yeah.
It even is important to me now.
Yeah.
Even in the context of now and talking on social media and podcasts and on posts, my regiment, the Special Forces Regiment, including Joint Special Operations Command, U.S. Army Special Operations Command, is my family.
Yeah.
And if I'm pissing them off, I've had people do it. I've had guys from the unit contact me. Hey, bro, do not post that.
Yeah.
Take that shit down. And there is if one person, even if they have a weird skewed perspective and don't understand the context, says, hey, man, you need to, or there's kind of like friction, it's not worth it to me.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm taking it down. So, long story short, left that organization on good terms and left with another guy who I convinced to come out there, and we stood up the SIF company to counter Al-Qaeda in Africa.
Yeah. If we could, before we kind of get into the weeds on that new stand-up, going back to that organization, one of the most common questions I get, having never been in the Navy's counterpart or obviously any experience with the Army's, a couple of questions I have, frankly, is could you kind of talk about the difference between what it's like deploying with that unit versus your regular Special Forces unit, kind of just basically?
Yeah. In basic terms, you have the Special Forces Command or regiment that does a lot of operations all over the world, and it requires a lot of personnel, a lot of equipment, a lot of support mechanisms because it's a large force. The unit that I'm talking about, and specifically the Joint Special Operations Command, is very small. And so when that unit deploys, it has every mechanism in place to support its capabilities, and it's monstrous.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even fathom. I mean, I've been in situations before with JSOC and Joint Special Operations where I didn't even have to pull security on the ground because my weapon system and my laser and night vision capability was limited in distance and capability from me as an individual, where I had FLIR thermal, cuts of spectrum that I can't even articulate, that would watch everything in front of me. 7 layers high.
No shit.
7 layers high, tracking everything. So
That's some fucking Terminator shit.
that is. But I will also say that, my first rotation with that organization, we went into Afghanistan. We didn't have shit because we gave up that terrain a long time ago. So we didn't own the battle space. We didn't have helicopters. I was, washing my balls with a bottle of water.
That shit's hot.
It is, yeah. Baby wipes and bottles of water, and we would eat mermite chow. And I was like, damn, this is like the most elite unit in the world, and this is how we're rolling. It's like, yeah, that's how you roll. So we're expected to get dirty and roll how you have to roll, but a real reason why those organizations are the best on the planet is their assessment, their selection, and then the assets that they have to bear.
Two questions on that. Number one, when you were in that unit, was the level of confidence that you had in going with those guys noticeably higher than the unit before because of all of that?
I will say, yeah, absolutely.
Like you felt more capable.
It's a similar experience that I had working with the CIA where, there's a vetting process, there's an assessment process. Every support guy, every enabler, every operator, every person, all the way to the admin clerk that's handling your uniform or your ERB for promotion is selected. Mm-hmm. And that's why I always agreed, and still to this day, that Special Forces Command, Green Beret, should recruit and assess their support guys.
The same way.
Yeah. Because now you're operating with people who have been incentivized to be there and operate there, and they know that they're a cut above the rest.
Yeah.
That pride puts you on another caliber of operations.
So would you say that the support personnel and the budget being way better, obviously that's, a tangible, hey, this is a fucking cut above. I guess, my curiosity lies in between selection and the pool of guys that are going over there and what their backgrounds entail. Did you feel that the collective mean average of skill set via the operator was noticeably higher?
Yeah, it was in a lot of ways. I think it more so because the protocols that are set are not deviated.
Yeah.
One of the biggest mistakes that Special Forces Command makes, even with SFAS, the Special Forces Assessment Selection Course, is that new officers come in and they try to reinvent the wheel. They're like, well, fuck, it's been this way for 10 years. I don't think it should be that way, and I'm going to change it. Whether that's them, wanting to get a bullet on their OER, wanting to change it for better reasons because it sucks. Whatever the reason is, it causes a whole bunch of instability in the end product, which is a byproduct of that process, versus organizations like the unit where since 1980, it's been the same exact thing, and that's exactly what you get. My experience in selection or even in the organization is the exact same experience 30 years prior.
Yeah. One thing in terms of selection, I'm curious, I don't have an intimate knowledge of it, but I'm fairly familiar with it just from the guys that I know that have gone through it, from what little they've shared. But I am curious if you compare Q course Green Beret selection to unit selection, what would you say is the biggest difference, whether it's difficulty level or what they focus on or whatever?
It's probably that, the Special Forces selection is selecting for somebody who's going to play an integral part into a team. That selection is partly team driven, but also partly individual selected. Like, can you carry a ruck? Can you walk through the woods? Can you navigate to unknown points? Versus unit selection, where it's an individual event. It is not based off of your ability to work as a team. In fact, there's no team events. It's, do you have the grit, the discipline, and did you prepare prior to showing up to be successful? When I went to selection, it was both selections that it was very different in the feel and then the output. I didn't think, both selections were difficult, but I didn't think that they were impossible. I just think that what you're looking for in a Green Beret versus what you're looking for in a potential unit member are two very different things.
Did you find that because it's so centered on the individual, do you see any lacking there in terms of, were there guys that had the Deion Sanders mentality showing up, or like, were there ever guys, because there's no fucking team integration at all? And, I think that coupled with the fact that, it's the thing, an aspect I don't think a lot of people understand or knew, is that really anybody DOD can try out for that, right?
Yeah.
And so if you, now granted, most guys are either Rangers, Green Berets, or, NavSoft, or have some kind of background in a team mentality, so you kind of don't need it. But for those one-offs, the outliers that, it's a National Guard fucking cook that just happens to be a fucking pipe hitter that goes through and makes it. Are there any guys that, because there's really no check and balance as it relates to being a good team player, that show up and now aren't? Or did you never have that problem?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's like people who show up in Special Forces selection and who are socially awkward, they don't operate well in teams, they're not going to make it. They'll get peered, and that's one of the indications that you're not going to operate well with the team, is when everybody hates you. So that happens all the time. But I was surprised in unit selection, and I went to unit selection with famous Navy SEAL who's very popular now, who ran ultra marathons and was a stud. He even talks about the fact that he went to selection, but he didn't finish. He didn't get selected, which could be for a myriad of reasons. There's a million reasons why he didn't get selected. But when I see guys like that, I go, oh, maybe it's just not the physical presence, because I didn't think I was a stud physically, but I got selected. I didn't think I was like an endurance athlete. I was nowhere close to that, but I got through with the endurance mental mentality of being consistent and continuing to go. And let me make this clear: is when I went to the unit, I assessed and went for one specific reason. I was successful in selection, and I got there. And I got in trouble. I don't really highlight the reason I got in trouble, because the dudes, I don't want to mention the guy's name or the circumstances behind it. And so I didn't get in the unit. I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a sniper in the unit. I didn't get to do that. My time there doing that was cut short. I could have went back and did some things to hash that. But I had a great experience, even in the sense of doing what I didn't want to do. But they are a cut above the rest, but not for the reasons you would think. I would think a dude who shows up who's an ultra marathoner and one of the most elite athletes on the planet would be successful. And he wasn't, as an individual.
Do you think that any of that is because there was such a highlight on that kind of public presence, that's a detractor?
Yeah, partly, but I don't think they would even let him show up if that was a mitigating factor. Those units that assess and select, even from your branch, are very good at even having the right people show up.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't want to waste a lot of time. I went to, we call it West Virginia selection. I went to a selection with 150 dudes. Only 4 of us got selected.
No shit.
Only 4.
How many completed it?
5.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, so I guess kind of circling back to the original question of, of whether it's the 4 guys that, got selected from your crew or anybody, were there any guys that were in the unit that you worked with that were like, Jesus Christ, dude, you selfish prick, like that? Because
Always.
Yeah. So do you think, I guess my question then is, do you think selection, even though obviously it cranks out a fucking super high product, should there be, maybe an augment to at least some sort of team mentality to kind of weed out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think by the mission intent of the organization from the get-go, maybe that wasn't a part of the program. And you look, everywhere you go, you're going to get narcissistic personalities. You're going to get egos. You're going to get, even shitbags. It's not like that place is immune from dudes that are just shitty.
Yeah, where you're like, how the fuck did
how this fucking guy get here?
Yeah. Who was that exactly?
Yeah. But when that's a really good point, because everywhere you go, you're going to have that. But now more than ever, in special operations, you're going to have to be able to operate as a team, because it's not like, hey, we're going to do this hostage rescue, we're going to do this hit, and you have one personality that you're looking for, which is maybe a young staff sergeant from Ranger Battalion who doesn't even have a personality, right? And you can get away with it because you just want him to be technically proficient.
Yeah.
Well, I want a dude that I could spend 6 months in a freaking hole with.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's got to at least be hot.
Yeah, at least be attractive.
Yeah.
Have a nice ass at least.
Yeah. Be a good kisser.
That's it. But these guys that come out when they come out, they don't assess for that.
Yeah.
And maybe it's personality driven, but they don't assess for that.
Because it's one of the things that I know, just from going through BUDS at an early age and then having been an instructor and the time that I spent in the SEAL teams, that I look back on and am very glad that they have such a highlight on that, is that, one of the benchmark principles that you learn in BUDS is that motherfucker, it's not about you. And B, you will not fucking survive unless you work together.
Yeah.
And to me, like, that's an integral part of the follow-on stuff when you're actually doing the job, is having that mentality cemented and ingrained into you, I think is excruciatingly valuable. From a selection standpoint, one thing I've always wondered, obviously, overwhelmingly, the percentage of population contributed to from Ranger battalions and Special Forces groups is high. Mm-hmm. Were there any just total oddball Coast Guard or, fucking national, like, guys that you're just like, are you fucking serious? That actually were selected? And
that, no.
Yeah.
I've never seen that. There have been outliers. But I remember showing up day one, getting a cot, and we had a guy in there, and he looked like he was 16. And the whole time I thought he was an embed. Yeah. I thought, like, this dude's a mole. Yeah. He's just here to spy on us. And so I stayed the hell away from him.
Yeah, fucking narc.
But I'm like, he was talking about stuff, and I realized he wasn't a special operations guy. He wasn't a combat arms guy. He was in the National Guard, and he was like he was like a heavy wheel mechanic, which nothing against mechanics, because there have been successful mechanics, but he had no clue even what he was getting himself into or what the organization was he was assessing for. And I'm like, that's impossible, because, like, why would you be here and why would they give you a slot to waste a slot? But maybe they had, I don't know, maybe he had a pool of candidates who applied and they just threw him in the mix, or he was a narc. But when I saw that, I was like, just stay the fuck away from this dude. Yeah. Because he's going to burn us down.
Yeah. And in terms of cross branch, there's, is it a single digit percentage of guys that come from either Marines or Navy or?
I don't know. Yeah. It seems like, it's rare. I don't think it's commonplace.
Yeah. I guess in terms of actual selection, did you work with anybody that wasn't either a Ranger or Green Beret in that unit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In the unit and organization, it's like you said, DOD wide.
Yeah, I mean, can you share where they came from? I mean, not without saying the unit, but just like they were a Navy guy.
The biggest influence I had with me and some of the best dudes that I operated with were old OG Det 1 guys. So we're talking about, like, before MARSOC stood up as a unit, Force Recon was hybrid molding into special operations, and when they stood up Det 1, which I'll let a Marine guy tell that history, but surprisingly, some of the best dudes I know in Joint Special Operations Command, period, are Marines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's not that surprising. I know, a bunch of them that were just regular 0300 guys that are fucking great dudes,
Yeah,
but they crank out a consistent product that my hat's off to the fucking Marines. As much brotherhood rivalry as there is, Navy and Marines.
We got a big incentive, like let me go in special operations and operate at the tip of the spear, so I don't have to go back to the fleet.
Yeah, no shit.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. In terms of, I guess from a dog standpoint, I'm real curious. You said that the dog that you guys had with you, Vinny, that perished in that operation, when you transferred over to the unit and looking at their canine program, could you kind of talk about the difference between or I guess, did you see a parallel between the capability and competency of the dogs in that unit versus we'll call them the tier 3 or vanilla special operations guys?
Yeah. I mean, I can't talk into detail about that, about the program, but I will say, having worked with all dogs from Special Operations Command, period, the selection processes for not just dogs, but dog handlers is very stringent.
Yeah.
And one of the regrets I have is I was given an opportunity to be a dog handler for a probationary period. They're like, you go do dogs, you do that. And
is that you fucked up, you can go do this?
Yeah. Yeah. And at the time, this is crazy, but at the time, I didn't even know what the fuck dogs did. I was like, I'm not fucking working. I'm not working a dog and having, like, I'm thinking like a K9 that smells, detects bombs and shit. Because up until that point, I only had a couple rotations and I hadn't really worked with task force. And they gave me an opportunity, and I literally said, I'm not interested. I came here to shoot people in the face, not fucking interested. Little did I know that when I went back to, because I had to leave for a period of time as part of my probationary period, that a dog would save my life from that organization.
So this is a different story than...
No, this is the same. So I went back and then went to Iraq in 07, because I went to selection in 07 and went back to Iraq went to Iraq and then working with a joint task force. And then I'm like, holy shit. And it's not an overarching regret, because I think I would have loved it too much and I would have stayed with it. I love dogs. And when I went back to the organization and deployed with them, we lost a couple dogs during subsequent rotations. But the caliber of dog as compared, really there's no comparison because I didn't work with special forces dogs much, but just speaking on the unit and the dogs, specifically the one that saved my life, the stringent process and the dogs that I worked with were the most beautiful, majestic killers I've ever seen on the planet. Yeah. I mean, these dogs would rip dudes' faces off. Yeah. I mean, and they would be back at the hooch, hanging out, being petted and everything else. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. And, just fast forwarding a whole career, I've seen some of those dogs retire and deal with PTSD and trauma. That's really my understanding and understanding myself. Yeah. Because I look at these dogs and go, well, these dogs are fucking going crazy. Some of them they got to put down because they're biting people. They're just going batshit. They can't hear. They're deaf. They're fucked up. They got TBI. That's fucking us. Mm-hmm. So, we are dogs of war. Yeah. And you want a good comparison biologically and physiologically of what that effect has on people, look at our fucking war dogs.
No, agreed. I mean, in having taken care of over 160 dogs now through the Warrior Dog Foundation, coming from just about every unit that exists.
That's right. You do that. That's no bullshit, man.
Yeah. I mean, so that's something we deal with a lot, and it's neat to hear, somebody with your perspective and experience, A, realizing that, and B, verbalizing it, because it is, the parallels that exist between dogs and humans is way more similar than it is disparate. And, one of the neat things about that I think we can all learn from dogs is that simple association. The PTSD that they experience is a simple association. It's an A plus B equals C relationship to negative stimuli. So the good news with that is that unlike us, like they're not rationalizing any of it, like, and one of the things I tell, a lot of my clients all the time is that think about it from the dog's perspective, is that dogs don't think in a fucking language. Like try to imagine living your life where you don't think or communicate in a verbal language. Everything you do is making an association with something and using nonverbal communication and body language to communicate. And so just understanding that and keeping that at the forefront when you're interacting with a dog, whether it's training your own dog or dealing with a dog with, PTSD symptoms, is the key, frankly, is that you have to understand that that's how they view the world. And so if you know that, now it's relatively simple. I won't say it's easy, but it's relatively simple to now create an environment, that can be easily communicated to them to now replace, if you think of it, another analogy I use is a piggy bank. And you've got, 2,000 negative coins in this dog's mental piggy bank. Well, now it's our job to set the environment up to where we can replace those negative coins with positive ones. And it's like rewriting a dog's mental hard drive.
Absolutely.
And just switching the association through positive means. And so, the nice thing about dogs is it's a lot simpler to fix those types of issues. Again, I will goddamn sure say it's not easy, but it's very simple, But I think, identifying that and using that as kind of a foundation or a backdrop to at least approaching the human component of that, I really think is a good measuring stick because it works well there. And I think part of the problem with the human condition as it relates to PTSD and how it's approached is overcomplicating it, is that if you do that same thing, I think, between proper nutrition and making sure that all of the, amino acid profiles and good fats and sunshine and proper hydration and all of the things that are going to set the body up to be able to heal, provided those are accommodated for, because without you're running uphill anyway, but making sure that that's accommodated and then just essentially mirroring that same methodology of repairing the veteran is by, doing like graduated micro excursions into some of those same environments, but pairing it with really positive outcomes, I think is worth trying, because I don't know of anybody that tries that. That's what we do with the warrior dogs, and it works remarkably well. We've got dogs that, will bite you just for trying to put them back in a fucking kennel run when they first show up. And, 2 months later, they're running on there on their own and fucking spinning around waiting to be fed, and they're fucking wagging their tail and they're happy. And so to me, there's something there that I would love to see the government spend a little more coin on, in terms of investigating some therapy that way. But fuck, they don't even pay for them, let alone,
I know, right?
Pay for, the any type of therapy. That's a whole nother fucking podcast. But are there any other dog stories that you could share, since I have so many dog listeners?
Yeah, I have one of the dogs, I won't mention its name. I've gotten my PP spanked for talking about this in too much detail, but I will say that there was a dog that I operated with in Afghanistan, and his handler left. So the handler of another dog told me to start handling this dog, and that's why it's so close and near and dear to me. At the time, I was just doing my job as a recon NCO, which involved technical reconnaissance, and I was managing this dog in between going out during the day for ops and going out during the night for ops. And this dog was known in the organization as being one of the best dogs ever bred. Ever brought to the unit, ever selected. And beautiful Belgian Mal. And the dog handler decided to take him out instead of his dog that night. Bit a dude in the middle of an open field, massive target set, a lot of people killed, a lot of bad guys killed on this objective. Armor-piercing rounds went through the dog on a lead, went through its American flag patch, 2 rounds. And those 2 rounds, one of the 2 rounds indexed, went through the handler's 416 like a laser beam. This was our AP round. Went through his magazine.
What the fuck caliber was it? Do you know?
Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know. It could have been, I'm pretty sure it was a 39, 7.62 by 39. ripped through the gun like a laser beam. I mean, we could take a Coke straw and stick it through the bolt carrier group. Went through the magazine on his plate carrier and indexed into his body armor. But if it wasn't for this dog pouncing on this bad guy at that time, and even taking that max muzzle velocity and reducing the foot-pounds of energy, he would have been dead. If it hit him right in the chest, right where that dude stood, he most certainly would have ate that round through his body armor. And we looked at it because we did the analysis on it as part of my job in technical. It was like, dude, this would have killed you, man. You're lucky to be alive. And I've seen that happen many times over my military career. Just the lives that these dogs have saved is amazing.
I'm assuming the dog didn't make it.
The dog did not make it.
Did you have instances where dogs were shot or injured significantly and they did survive?
We have had dogs that have been blasted with suicide vest and shrapnel and survived with concussions. We've taken dogs personally. Our organization have taken dogs to the cash clinic to be medevaced like a American soldier, and where they have survived with shrapnel wounds. Like even this dog that recently was made famous for the raid on al-Baghdadi that was electrocuted during the raid. That's commonplace. And those dogs operating with our organizations get the same treatment as an American.
Yeah. I love knowing that. I know people love to hear that. Did you know the dog that was on that one?
I didn't. He was, I'd been long removed from the organization prior to it happening, but I know the caliber of the handlers in those dogs, and there's no doubt about, especially I know specifically the part or the organization, because I used to be in that part, that they're the best.
Yeah. One of the neatest things about them, I think, is that, a lot of times, for people that are really far removed from the military and look at it, probably a lot less biased and far more objectively than maybe guys like us would, or people that have been in the machine and seen the dogs work or whatever, tend to show some resistance to using them, and that there's kind of a double-edged sword, I think, that a lot of people think of, and that, where you're putting these dogs in harm's way, and agreed. However, one of the things that I really like about their capability is because they're so small, fast, quiet, and efficient, they, in essence, save their own lives by being that way. Yeah. And while, yes, sometimes they are lost, like it's almost like planes crashing. Like there are thousands of operations taking place where they're not, and where they're not hurt. Yep. And just like with people, and that it's not common for them to get killed and or even severely wounded. While, yes, it does happen. When you look at the broad scope of how many operations take place where dogs are doing their thing, like, 99 point whatever fucking percent of the time, they're not getting hurt, and they're actually not just keeping humans safe, but because they're as fast and, fucking greased lightning as they are in a lot of areas, they're actually keeping themselves safe because of it, which is nice. Is there anything else canine-wise you can share?
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you brought up, and it ties to the canines, is there's a misunderstanding that special operators and special operations is somehow the most dangerous job. And it's likely not statistically, because of the caliber of the assessed and trained that operate at the tip of the spear. So if we put the best operators on the planet out there with the best assets and support mechanisms, they're more likely going to be successful and less likely to be killed or injured. And I think that goes hand in hand with the dog programs and then the animals that we're putting out there on the battlefield. Yeah,
animals, humans too, right?
Humans too, yeah.
Is there a best bite story you could share?
Oh, man. So, probably not. I don't even know if I can share it. I don't know if it's allowed to be shared, but I've seen some of these dogs, man.
I guess without disclosing maybe necessarily tactics, just like what the circumstance was in terms of like where he was bit or,
Yeah, so a lot of the call outs that we do, as you call somebody out, and it's odd to even say that out loud because, maybe it started in the pioneering days or cowboys and Indians where it's like, come out with your hands up kind of thing. But we started doing that because Al-Qaeda is smart. They're going to V-bid or IED or pressure plate or PKM, choose your sabotage booby traps. They're going to do that. And to have a dog, like you said, that's nimble, that you could throw through a window is a game changer. And, we would rig up all kinds of equipment to our dogs and throw them through windows and have them hunt. They're sight predators. They'll hunt and hear and find anything that's hiding. On one operation, we had a dog, and this was in my SIF days. The Commanders and Extremist Force is a pretty elite force in Special Forces. So we'd get great dogs, great assets. We threw a dog through a window, and it was going through this house, and we didn't realize it, but it was connected to another house, and it was a maze. And this maze of structures and everything else, we couldn't get the dog. We couldn't find the dog. We didn't know what the hell was going on. So we're like looking at the handler, and the handler's looking at us, and then the ground force commander's like, I don't know what the hell to do. Like, we have to go in here and find out where this dog's at.
And you walk into a room and he's laying on a couch fucking
watching TV, watching Al Jazeera. Yeah. So we start soft clearing this house, and come to find out, he found a trap door inside this house where it was part of like the shitter structure, which is just a room with a hole in the wall or a hole in the ground. And there was like a false trap door. He went through this trap door and was eating this dude's leg. And this dude was in a part of the tunnel where he couldn't sit up to even fight the dog.
Oh, Christ.
So he was laying down, hiding in this small hole, while this dog in particular was a Mao, was inside of the hole with him, chewing on his leg.
Fucking Christ.
And we didn't know how long this had been going on. But we went in there. It
was like, the guy even conscious?
The guy was in and out of consciousness. Yeah. And it was basically from his ankle to his knee, and was just destroying. I mean, basically gnawed through his entire leg.
Like a KFC leg fucking.
Yeah, it was a KFC leg. What's crazy is, what's really crazy is when we discover this, we pull him out and we drug this dude out. The dude had a belt of grenades and ammo, but he couldn't get, because the way he had pushed himself through the hole, he physically couldn't move his hand from where it's above his head down to where his grenades are. And if he didn't identify the bad guy hiding in the hole, we certainly would have ran into him, and certainly more than likely would have been set up for an ambush. Yeah. I mean, he was part of the AQ cell that we were looking for, and he was just waiting to do some damage.
Dude, that is fucking gnarly.
Yeah.
There's a similar story of a law enforcement group that almost to the T, it was duct work. It was a robbery scenario where the guy climbed up into, it was probably 12 or 14 inch, had the Superman fucking pose and wiggle through this shit, and a dog came and got him in his the top of his hamstring. Yeah, like from the bottom of his ass to his knee was just, there was nothing there. It was just fucking, his femur basically. That's all, and he was completely unconscious. But that shit's, those fucking dogs, when they get into that fucking blinded by genetic, fucking forward aggression, it's something to see.
I love them.
Yeah. All right. So once you left there, how much can you talk about the group that you stood up after that?
So I could talk about it. We stood up a new contingency to respond to things that were going on in Africa. As we stood this took us a year. We had a year, and when we showed up, this is like the movies. I mean, this is something that I live for. Where we showed up, and they're like, okay, you have the opportunity to select your team. You come up with the training that you want to do, whatever it takes to get these guys ready. And we had the full support of the colonel at the time, who was a general now, Colonel Dietrich, who I have a lot of respect for. And he said, Mike, just do what you got to do to make this happen. We had a good company commander, good sergeant major. I was a sniper reconnaissance team sergeant, so I had a team of snipers. One of the difficult challenges that I had is in special operations in the SIF, to be on a sniper reconnaissance team, you have to be sniper qualified. You have to be Sephardic qualified, which is our CQB, Advanced Hostage Rescue School, and you have to be free fall qualified. So sending my guys, some who were cherries, who were good dudes, and I wasn't going to let them go, but they had to go to school for a year. I mean, they were in all these schools back to back. And then Once we got them assimilated, we had to do the vetting and validation by Special Operations Command to ensure that we can meet the mission set. And this involved a lot of interagency operations and coordination. And also, at the tail end of it, we identified who was going to deploy first, and it was me. It was me as a team leader, and it was 2 of my guys. We were going to deploy as the first members of this organization to Libya. And we vetted or validated September 1st of 2012.
Right before Benghazi.
Right before, 10 days before Benghazi.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, it's interesting about this, and I'm glad I'm on your podcast because I know you have relationships with some of the men that were killed that night on September 11th. But what's important to note is prior to even September 11th happened, there's a lot of controversy about did we know the circumstances and situation and everything else? And the answer is unequivocally, we knew everything about that circumstance. I knew I was going to deploy, so I was having my 18 Fox, who's an intelligence guy on my team, brief us all the significant activity that was taking place in Libya every single week. So he was tracking SIGACs in Benghazi, in Tripoli, in between, and was telling us a lot of bad shit was happening. In fact, it dictated a lot of my training that I was doing with my team. Because I would say, hey, well, the UN just got a frag thrown at their vehicle. The Italians just got their vehicle blown up. We need to do training on mobility and react to contact. So it drove a lot of our training protocol. Well, then Benghazi kicks off. At the time that Benghazi kicked off, I was in a special missions unit compound at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I was doing crosstalks because it was there's a joint task force or operation, and was watching the whole thing unfold on ISR, on the planning. We did a hasty planning. I was part of that process, and then was coordinating with my team and my company back at Fort Carson, Colorado, to where we were standing up to launch and deploy, because our job was to do that, to respond and react. So, longer story shorter, we winded up leaving a few weeks right after Benghazi and deploying with the intent originally of standing up a 1208, which is a counterterrorism program, to go counter Al-Qaeda, which just tells you obviously that we were thinking about things that were happening that was bad, because we had already pre-planned that we were going to do that. And then also find the men who were responsible for killing and Ambassador Stevens, Adam Smith, Glenn Doherty, and Tyrone Woods that night, and develop target packets to be able to give the DoD options to kill or capture those guys.
So 2 questions. One, from a personal knowledge standpoint on your end, were you aware of any realistic and legitimate capability from a quick reaction force standpoint that was not used?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's one thing I know, having a good personal relationship with one of the guys that was not killed, that was on an adjacent rooftop that I've spoken with. I know the details, but especially I love that you're on here too, and that it's a totally different perspective, and that it's the first time we've ever met, so it's a totally different dimension of it that can kind of corroborate it, that I think people just need to fucking know.
Yeah, we had capability in and around the area of operation that was taking place in Libya. For geographical reference, Libya is the furthest northern country in the continent of Africa, right across the pond from Italy, right across the pond from Malta, from Greece, and the whole entire European theater of command. We had, the commanders in extremist force, which when people say what kind of guy, what were you in special operations? I don't say, I was a unit guy, because I didn't grow up in the unit. I didn't spend my entire career there. I was there for a few years. My career was mostly spent in the commanders in extremist force, and those boys across 5 groups, which is partly part of the history and lineage from the unit. Their job is to do crisis response in their geographical theater of operation, which in this case was Africa for us. But there was a unit called C-110, Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group in Estonia at the time, that was forward deployed doing a training exercise and had all the air assets and capability to react and respond. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Look, when I hit the ground in Libya, the dude who was the operational commander of all special operations forces on the ground in Libya was a Wells Fargo employee. He was a reserve lieutenant colonel who was tasked to do a specific job, which was, hey, you're going to be the staff J3 or whatever, staff commander of all special operations. On the ground in Libya, he didn't even know what the fuck the SIF was.
Good news is he hooked you up with a sweet auto loan, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he gave me a sweet auto loan. He gave me a discount on my house. But it's like we had all the capability to respond. Now, a broader question is, would it have made a difference? Well, that's relative, because the question is, did we respond accordingly and appropriately right after Benghazi? The answer is no.
Yeah,
we pulled out.
Yeah, well, and agreed. I mean, that's the same kind of synopsis I've gotten from everybody else that has pretty intimate knowledge of that. And probably one of the most infuriating statements that I've heard in response to why people weren't sent from Italy or other parts of the Horn of Africa, other areas where there were guys that were absolutely capable of jumping in, is that there wasn't enough time. And to me, like, I don't know how you could possibly buy that. It's like a police department when you call 911 saying, well, we're not going to be able to make it there in time, so we're not coming. Like, you don't do that ever. Like, how the fuck do you know how long it's going to take for everything to unfold? That in conjunction with, I don't know how much knowledge you have on, the overhead. There were, predators and reapers that I know were armed that were in the area that could have done fucking something.
Yep.
And the reality is, we were talking about this before, is that, the bottom fucking line is that politics drove the indecision to do anything.
Absolutely.
And, anybody that thinks differently is misguided or lying to themselves. But one question I didn't ask that I did want to ask, and then we'll move on from there, is shooting competency learned at the unit. I know on the Navy side, the difference between regular SEAL teams and Dev is pretty significant in terms of their ability, especially with pistol target, 5 to 25 yards type of shooting is, there's so much time spent on that most of those guys, to even be able to be there, stay there, et cetera, you've got to become ridiculously fucking good. I'm assuming it's pretty similar. Like, did you see a huge step up in your competency level?
Yeah, completely. I mean, as a SIF guy, you have to be able to shoot in the SIF. But even in the SIF, like, Special Forces Command does not invest in making shooters of their individual operators. Yeah. That's not what they do. And that's a detriment to the force capability. The unit, and having worked with every branch, and I'm not just saying this because I was there and I went through the shooting program, they are the best shooters on the planet, in the world. And it's because of their willingness to commit to the training, but also their willingness to bring in consultants, trainers, experts to make them better. And that's always an evolving process. And there is no, man, when you shoot 5 days a week as your job, pistol, carbine, rifle, whatever it is, Gustav, name it, you become really efficient. And I've never shot so much in my life. Yeah.
Was there ever rivalry-wise Army, Navy, Tier 1?
I didn't experience that. Like I did have, like, I've worked with, and I'm saying their names because they've since passed on. They were killed in Extortion 17, but I worked with John Foss and Matt Mills, and both of them were excellent operators, but there was never, maybe it was like in jest, but it was always a very professional, respectful interaction and relationship. Yeah. And man, the ability to cross operate fluid with no handover, and it was just amazing. Yeah, it was amazing.
It is neat to see, that ability to kind of intertwine that way at such a high level.
Absolutely, it is.
Matt and I were in Iraq. It was his first platoon. We did a platoon together. Did you ever wrestle that fucking guy?
He's like. He's got that retard strength. No offense to retard. I'm sorry.
I don't know how you could take offense to that, right?
Yeah, he's got retard strength. Yeah.
The the mangler. I don't know if they called him that when you were there, but or with him, I guess. But he was something else.
He's a stud, man.
Yeah.
He was a stud for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fucking a painful loss. I mean, they all are, but
Yeah, that was a hard one. Yeah, Extortion 17 was a fucking hard one.
yeah. Speaking of men lost, I see you've got a bracelet on. You care to share that?
Yeah, so this one is Master Sergeant Ben Bittner. So Ben we were on 6-6 together. We were in Afghanistan. He was the Charlie on my team. He was a mentor of mine. I was a young dude, staff sergeant. He was a senior E7. Ben was a solid warfighter, man. He went over to the SIF with me. He should have been in the unit as a breacher because he was just a solid fucking dude. He made E8, took a team. He went to war with his team, and just like how politics get in the way of fucking everything, really. That at the tactical level, he was told to go recce IED emplacement site when they should have dropped the bomb on it. And being the dude he said he's going to lead from the front. He says, "Fucking guys, get behind me. I'm gonna do this." So he was doing sensitive site exploitation of the IED emplacement, and stepped on a pressure plate, blew him in fucking half. He died on a helicopter on the way back to Kandahar. Ironically, he met his wife in Kandahar in the army, and that's where he fucking died. Benjamin Franklin Bittner, born on the 4th of July.
No shit.
You can't get more American than that. He was like the strongest fucking dude I've ever met. It's, everybody says like, it's the good ones that die. In special operations, everybody who dies in special operations is a fucking good one.
Yeah. No truer words have ever been spoken. Is there a ballpark number you could put on like close fucking friends of yours that you've lost?
16.
16?
Yeah, I know that because when I was a mess in my transition from active duty to being a civilian, I was all fucked up. But I dudes that I knew, it's not like dudes that I just kind of fucking had passing by. But in total, 16 dudes. I etched all their names on a fucking bracelet one day in San Antonio, Texas, on a leather bracelet that had to be fucking 3 inches wide to fit their names on it. Going through all the names of the dudes that I've lost that I knew, 16 fucking dudes, man.
So tell me, if you would, about kind of the impact that's had on you. I'm always curious to get fellow veterans that have had, close personal friends be lost, way before when they were anticipating, and the impact that has.
I don't. What's odd is, for me, it hasn't had that negative of an impact in the sense that I know what they died doing and serving, and so I knew the stakes, and so did they. So when I think about that loss, I feel sorry for their families. I feel sorry for their friends. But for me, it kind of keeps me in the fight, keeps my headspace proper. Because when I'm feeling sorry for myself, or when I'm fucked up, when I'm just being a shitbag, I think about what they would say to me if the opportunity for them to live was available. And they would say, "Shut the fuck up, stop being a pussy, and live your life." Yeah. I mean, I hate guys seeing themselves, and this isn't just for guys, it's for anybody, but people who experience trauma and they continue to look inside themselves and somehow source a solution that's not there, instead of kind of introspectively looking at the circumstance and realizing that death is a part of life, and how you die, how you're taking out of this world is just as important as the life that you live. Yeah. And so for them to volunteer to be in a position to put their lives on the line, none of those guys would take it back, because they were doing what they loved. And so that gives me motivation to just stay in the fucking fight and live because they couldn't. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to me, it's really refreshing to hear that. I share a very similar sentiment. I kind of try to reduce it to, if the tables were turned, and I'm not a religious guy, but let's just say I have an ability to, on the other side, observe, Glenn, feeling sorry for himself and contemplating suicide, or, using the bottom of a fucking Jack Daniels bottle to to whatever. Like I would want to reach through the spirit world and slap the shit out of him and be like, hey, fuck face.
100%.
Like, I'm not here. You are. Like, stop pissing away the opportunity
Yep.
and fucking take advantage of the fact that you're still here, you know. And to me, like, I don't think there's a better way to honor anybody who's been lost for any reason than to do exactly that. Like,
Absolutely.
you know, take advantage of it. So I wish that message was a little more prevalent, because I do agree. I hate to see, you know, some veterans that struggle with it that don't look at it. You know, I'm not going to say they use it as a crutch or an excuse, but it's just that, you know, they have a, you know, an impact that's burdening them from, you know, being productive and living as good a life as they can possibly lead. But so that's great to hear you say that. As that time in your career wrapped up, what was all right, fuck this, I'm getting out? Because that 18 years, that's pretty rare. You know,
Yeah.
my last guest got out at 16 and a half being disgruntled. Was that?
Yeah, a lot of it had to do with Libya.
Yeah.
I mean, in Libya, look, I didn't develop the target packet. A unit developed the target packet. Special Operations Command did, and we had all of the options. My option, for me specifically, was the bilat option, which is bilateral operations, meaning using a Libyan face to kill or capture the bad guys responsible and where they're facilitating it. We had a unilateral option. We even had a kinetic option. So we had all the options to bear, and we dropped it in front of the chief of mission, who is the ambassador at this time. It was a chargé, Alexander Pope. And I'll call that fucker out at any time of the day.
Where was he from?
So I don't even know. He was, after Stevens was killed, who was loved in that country, they appointed him as the temporary chargé, which was a short period of time, but he was there as the chargé and basically said, hey, the political climate won't allow us to do anything about this. And we're like, I remember specifically a very, very good dude from the organization, from a special missions unit, standing up and saying, so you're telling me your fucking ambassador was just killed? 4 Americans were just lost. We have the path to kill or capture them, and you're not willing to fucking do it? And he was irate, like he should have been. When that happened, you know, it was a constant struggle. And then the last straw for me was partly I was getting recruited for the agency. At that time, I had finished my college degree, so I had a opportunity to do something else. Also, on active duty, I didn't want to be a sergeant major because I didn't want to do fucking staff. You know, typically that's a route for us. And I will tell you, at the higher echelons of Special Forces Command specifically, sergeant majors, I don't know what the fuck happened to them. They lost their ball sack along the way, but they get shit on by officers, and they don't have any command and control opportunities within the organizations that they run. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be a sergeant major. I became a sergeant major later in 19th Group under different circumstances. But Algeria, the Marlboro Man, who was
Infamously.
Can I say that out loud? Infamously known as, because he was a head of a terrorist organization that was bartering for cigarettes in the Trans-Sahel area, which was the area that we were operating in. He took an oil refiner hostage in Algeria. And this, what I'm saying isn't classified because it's open source. My guys and a joint task force were prepared to conduct a hostage rescue because we had Texans there, Americans that were there. We loaded out our fucking Toyotas, our Land Cruisers. We were prepared. My guys were dressed like we were ready to go conduct an operation. They wouldn't allow us to do it. A joint task force shut us down.
So what the fuck happened with these guys?
They got killed.
No shit.
The Texans got killed. It made like a fucking 30-second plug on 60 Minutes, and a couple news stories picked it up. But that's it.
Do you know what company they were with?
I don't. It was a significant oil company, and southeast Algeria on the border of Libya. I mean, we were 30 kilometers away. We had planned multiple courses of action to do it.
So was it Pope that shut that down?
No, it was actually, I believe, Special Operations Command Africa. And this is what infuriated me at the time is I'm a team sergeant. My job is operating as the representative for the crisis response in the continent of Africa, as the team lead for the Commanders in Extremist Force. The dude that I was working for, who was a Wells Fargo employee, didn't even know what the fuck the CIF was. He didn't even know what crisis contingency was. I picked up the phone and I called SOCAF, Special Operations Command Africa.
I thought it was sock as fuck.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it is. So I pick up the phone and I call, and their staff duty answers. I said, hey, what the fuck? Let me talk to somebody from J3. And he's like, who is this? I was like, it's the team lead for fucking Libya. Let me talk to somebody at J3. Oh, Sergeant, there's nobody from J3 here. I was like, it's 10 o'clock at night, and there's a fucking hostage. Like, I just heard it through the BBC. What the fuck are you talking about? Oh, nobody's here at night. Like, what? This is an active combatant command for special operations, and there's no fucking body monitoring it. Now, supposedly it's changed since then, but what are you talking about? Like, let me talk to somebody in S2, J3, J2. There is nobody but a fucking dude, playing PlayStation on staff duty. So I went to the command, went to JSOC. I was like, we got to fucking spin something up. So we started planning. We started working on the crisis contingency like good special operations guys. And long story short, nothing happened. We decided not to do anything about it. Algeria launched a botched hostage rescue, killed a whole bunch of hostages, including Americans. When I came back, I basically told my chain of command to go fuck themselves. I reported this lieutenant colonel because he was getting drunk while my guys were out operating and training in the middle of the night. Nothing was done about it. The political climate wouldn't allow for pieces of shit to be taken off the battlefield who were shitbags and compromising my security, my men's security. I didn't even have I came back and got put in for a meritorious service medal, which is just kind of standard operating procedure for a E8 who spent his whole life in the military. They downgraded my award to a fucking ARCOM, Army Commendation. I got an Army Commendation once for getting a 300 on a PT test, a physical training test. I put one of my 18 Deltas, who was a staff sergeant who was deployed with me, in for an award for going to Benghazi for an operation, and he got an ARCOM, an Army Commendation Award. So, I love the regiment, but fuck that chain of command, fuck that company commander who is one of the biggest piece of shits I've ever worked with. And I don't say that lightly because I want to support ground fighters and ground force commanders who are doing their fucking job. But all the way up the chain, I could write a fucking, a 10 series Netflix special on fucking a documentary on how fucked up the process was. So I decided to get out and work for the agency instead.
And then realized they're as fucked up.
They're just as fucked up. And that's what I realized.
Same whore, different dress.
And I stopped chasing the rainbow at some point.
Yeah. What was the time period from when you guys were made aware that hostage situation with the oil workers, like when you found out about it versus when they were killed and it was denied? Was that like a
few days? Yeah,
so
a few days.
Several days of them.
Yeah. A few agonizing days. It's the first time in my military career that I had a breakdown in military composure. Yeah. Where I went in on this lieutenant colonel in the skiff, which is just a special compartmentalized secret kind of room, and flipped the table and fucking went off on him. And
broke his PlayStation.
Yeah. I remember. I mean, the dude was probably drunk when I was yelling at him. That's why he didn't kick me off the continent. But
did you fuck him up?
I didn't, but I made threats. And I said, listen, man, I don't know what the fuck you're doing here. I don't know what we're doing here, but you need to pull your head out of your ass. And I was trying to be tactful, and then I just fucking lost it. And one of the team leads, a good dude by the name of Craig, who was my team leader on my detachment. I was the operations NCO, the team sergeant, kind of like put his hand on my shoulder and said, calm down, Mike, it's okay. And I walked out, and my guys were downstairs watching TV, and they looked at me like I just beat mommy. And from there, I let Craig take over, and I ripped out 3 weeks later. 2 weeks later, after hitting the ground at Carson, I was out in the military. I dropped paperwork. They said, are you dropping paperwork? And I was like, I'm fucking out. Fuck you guys. Like, I dropped it. People didn't even know that I was dropping paperwork. And before you knew it, before my company even came back from Germany, where we were pre-staged, I was already out of the Army.
How did that impact the unit that you stood up then? I mean, was that a kind of a backfill struggle for them, or were they able to kind of recuperate with you?
So I was already, on a typical master sergeant in SF is restricted to how much team time they had. Meaning I only could have 2 years, a maximum of 2 years of Special Forces team sergeant time.
So you were they were already planning on your departure.
I had already done 2 years.
Yeah.
I was over 2 years. So if they told me you could be a team sergeant for the rest of your career, I would have never left that team.
Yeah.
So my time was already up. They had already planned to have a backfill to put in the position for team sergeant. And, just like we all think we're entitled and too significant, we're a fucking cog in the wheel, man. We're a spoke on the fucking wheel.
Fucking pawn on the chessboard for sure.
That's it, man. Yeah, that's it, man.
Maybe you're the felt underneath the pawn.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. All right. So relatively abruptly, you find yourself a fucking jackass civilian.
Yeah.
So, being in that position that, for your entire adult life, you've never really found yourself in. Talk about that experience of how fish out of water you felt or not. And kind of what that was like, finding yourself being like, holy fuck, now what?
Yeah, people forget, one thing in association with PTSD is a career in special operation is all traumatic. I mean, everything you do in special operations, from training to the downtime, which there is none, to the experiences you face at war, that entire experience is, like I said, a dog at war. So when you come home from that and you're expected to be a house pet, it really doesn't work out that way.
Yeah.
And so I got out and transitioned straight into the National Guard, which is the reserve component of Special Forces in 19th and 20th Special Forces Group. And that was cool because I had a team on active duty. I stood up a team in the National Guard, but it was 1 week in a month. I mean, that wasn't something that was earth-shattering when it came to transitions for me. It didn't make it easier. So I had a tough time, man. I fucking was falling apart, man. Relationships, I burned the relationships. I was isolating myself, thinking that was a proper answer. I'm not even a drinker, and I was drinking.
Yeah.
Just trying to drown away just shit I didn't want to think about. And so it was painful. Luckily, I got a job with the agency, which helped a lot because I remember the time where I got vetted with the agency and they said, hey, you're going to now deploy. I was super pumped. I'm like, thank God I'm getting back on the road. And there wasn't a big lull. I mean, we're talking about 6 to 8 months of a lull. But in that 6 months with terminal leave, dude, it was like being in purgatory.
Were you ever married on active duty?
I was.
Yeah.
I completely fucked that up, man.
Any kids?
None. No.
Well, at least there's that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, that being one of the casualties of the job and, in that 6 to 8 month purgatory time, was there any soul searching? Did you go on any trips? Were there any elements where, that you kind of had an epiphany or you like slapped yourself, or was it just getting that job with the agency of now having something else to focus on that really kind of pulled you out of it?
So I definitely had an epiphany. I mean, one of the instances that I often discuss is just hitting rock bottom. I mean, rock bottom for me was literally bottom of my kitchen floor. I had a house in Colorado. I had a wife. I had everything going for me. I had everything. And I pissed it all away. And, after talking to counselors and psychologists and everything else, what we often do is similar to what we experience in war, where we think what we have in structure needs to be burned down to the ground for some reason. Sabotage or, burning bridges and burning shit to the ground is part of our MO. And so at rock bottom, I had to get off my ass and do something. I wasn't, I went from working out every day, being a leader at the tip of the spear, being in special operations, which clearly defined me, to not having an identity. I didn't know who the fuck I was. So I went to hot yoga, which is crazy.
Mostly to stare at chicks' asses in the back of the room.
Mostly to stare at chicks' asses, which was cool in San Antonio, Texas. I did that, and it was a pretty cool experience. 90 minutes of suffering made me feel at home, and it sucked. I was going through a gallon of water a period. If you're a 120-pound female, hot yoga is not that difficult. But if you're a 240-pound dude, it's fucking hard.
Yeah, that's inflexible as fuck.
That's inflexible. She can't even touch my toes. Yeah. And so that experience helped me get back on the right path, getting back into the gym, more physically fit, and finding the old routines that I didn't have. I always think it's funny when operators or special forces guys come out and they're like, we're unconventional or we're irregular because you do irregular warfare. Like, no, you're not, man.
Yeah, you're regimented as fuck.
You're regimented as fuck. You're doctrine. Yeah. You're literally the walking definition of doctrine because you know your limit of advance, you know your left and right limits, you know your backstops. You live life off of a timetable that is clearly annotated on a whiteboard. Yeah. And when all that goes away and you have to do it on your own, it's fucking hard, man.
Yeah. I know there's a fair bit that you can't share about your time with the agency. Of what you can, what did you take away from that experience? What was that like?
Man, I didn't know what to expect, because I was one of those guys who hated contractors when I was in the GWAT. If I was sitting down, after an op where we lost a guy or we had a big gunfight in a chow hall and I saw a dude who was making 5 times more than I was making and we were in the middle of the war fighting and he's getting this fat paycheck, I thought, man, how selfish of you,
working half the year.
Working half the year.
Yeah.
How selfish of you. And then I found myself there because I had exhausted war. The only reason I didn't stay in the military is because there wasn't really shit going on.
Yeah.
And every single time I fought to be in it, I was getting denied. And so I was like, you know what? Fuck this. This is not working out. I'm tired of chasing the rainbow with DOD. Even at the tip of the spear with an SMU, you still belong to the Army, the bottom line. And so I thought, somehow, some way, there's just an organization out there that allowed you the latitude to operate. And that organization for me was the CIA. I had read about Mike Spann as a paramilitary operations officer as the first casualty after 9/11 in Afghanistan. And I was intimately familiar with paramilitary operations, with Ground Branch, and that's what I wanted to do. In fact, my entire special operations career was a stepping stone to get to that. So I got recruited. And I started going through the process. And then at the end of that process, the sequester happened, which is that big stop loss essentially on all hiring and budgets and everything else. And so it put me in this lull period. Well, in that lull, thank God for the independent contractor realm, they picked me up and allowed me to do security contracting overseas to protect people in austere and shitty environments. So I did that for a little while. And what I realized was it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. I mean, I showed up to vet with the best dudes who were from Tier 1 units that had to operate at the tip of the spear and retired out of there as CSMs, Command Sergeant Majors, from every branch of service. And the minimum for my specific job as an independent contractor versus an industrial who works for a company, there's 100 companies out there that are security contract companies. Blackwater used to be the popular one back in the day, or the unpopular or infamous now. But I was an independent. I had to have 6 years of soft time. So when I showed up, dudes were there to go to work. And the vetting process was a lot more difficult than I thought. In fact, I started... I think March 14th, we started a contractor development course, CDC, where we're training people to prepare for that because I have guys that still work for the organization. They're having a hard time getting dudes because my generation of GWAT dudes, when I assessed in 2013 and 14, had a lot of experience. There's dudes now getting out who they barely got a rotation. They might have one to Afghanistan. And they can't shoot like we used to shoot. And so they're hard pressed to retain dudes or get dudes that are capable of shooting at that level.
Yeah.
It's the hardest vetting process I've ever been through as far as shooting, including the most elite counterterrorism unit in the world.
I think that would surprise a lot of people.
Yeah.
Having said that, did you find that even with that there was still that... ability for guys that probably shouldn't be there to be there, or was it pretty fucking...
Honestly, and I've been asked this before, the most capable operators in the world are in that job.
Yeah.
Meaning they know how to plan, they know how to organize, they know how to operate. Now, maybe they're fucking weirdos because there's a whole bunch of weirdos in that group, especially
bunch of foot fetish. Fucking,
oh, yeah, just weird shit, right?
What's the weirdest fucking thing?
I had a dude who used to race drones. And he was a professional drone racer. I was like, what the fuck does that even mean? And he showed me, but he was such a nerd, but he was so capable. So
fucking Red Bull drone racing.
It's crazy. When you, and that's something to be said though, when you operate in a environment like Yemen, where you're in the middle of fucking nowhere, and the only thing you have is a carbine and a pistol appendix carried in your crotch, and that is your plan. There is no QRF coming. There's no Ranger Regiment on containment. You're it. That's why. Yeah. I mean, you have to trust the dude who's next to you. And I've never been on a movement or in a vehicle with a dude from that organization that I didn't trust, that had capability to save his ass and my ass. So,
with that, obviously the nature of that job is almost a polar opposite in terms of it's purely defensive.
Yep.
Versus where you came from of being purely offensive.
Yep.
Did you find that to be a hard transition to make, or was it fairly seamless because of similar movements, maneuvers, etc.?
My instructors, and I had dudes that were some of the best instructors on the planet. I mean, dudes that were on the fucking Bin Laden raid, guys that were fucking just operating. I had 20, 30 years of experience per. They made it very... Like, for example, I'll give you a story. I was doing the vetting process for CQB. And obviously, CQB is a collective task. It's a task where individuals come together to accomplish an end goal or objective. Whether it's hostage rescue, DA raids, or whatever it may be, movement to contact, you name it. So doing that is a lot different than being in a singleton and doing single-man CQB. Like, I'm about to do a video on YouTube tomorrow morning on single-man CQB. Because what's the considerations for single-man CQB? Well, you can't paint the walls with your carbine when you're an individual moving around with a carbine, because it doesn't work that way. Like, there's too many problem sets to manage as an individual, but there is a method to the madness. So I remember I was doing CQB, and I was going in to rescue one of the guys, one of the full-time employees, like they call them staffers. And I went in to rescue him, and I got him, and I linked him to the rear of my belt and was protecting him as I started firing maneuvering. And a dude comes to the door. He kicks in the fucking door, and he's in a blower suit. And I fucking stitch him. I tune him the fuck up. And I'm like, I shoot him, and then we get done with it. And the instructor, I think I can call his call sign because nobody's going to know him, but his name was Race. And he's like, you can't do that, man. I'm like, can't do what? He's like, you shot a dude who was unarmed. I'm like, yeah, but he's an aggressor. If I'm doing a hostage rescue and I kick in a door to rescue a dude, and I'm moving through a fire fight, and a dude kicks in a door on me, he's getting shot. And he goes,
"I want you to Jason Bourne his ass?"
Yeah, he's like, no, but he's not. You can't shoot unarmed guys. And I'm like, oh, all right, fuck. Well, I guess I have to start adjusting my tactics, right? So I started adjusting and was successful in that, but it was a lot different. You know, it's offensive in the fact that you have to be prepared to go into situations by yourself or in small teams to rescue people, but with little to no support. And, you know, just like Glenn and those guys were put into that situation. They didn't have a lot of support. They had none.
Yeah. So during your tenure there, were there instances where you got into pretty gnarly gunfights, or was it pretty inactive?
No, it was active in a different way. It was active because the environment that we operated in was always unstable. And I QRF'd Sean once when he got in a gunfight. Got tuned up pretty bad. Luckily, nobody was killed. I QRF'd that incident. I've had some hairy situations, nothing catastrophic, nothing that we couldn't fight through. But that job is so volatile. It's so fragile. You're on the fringe of just chaos.
All the time.
All the time. Yeah. You're on the fringe of just being pulled out of your car and just and killed.
Yeah.
You know, the best example I can give you of this is you pull up to a checkpoint and you're in an armored Land Cruiser and you're rolling under whatever condition, and there's an anti-aircraft gun that's sitting at the checkpoint pointed at your face. Well, you could be a badass and you could say, I'll tune these dudes up. If they try to do anything, I'll tune them up. But the dude who's on the Dishka is like a 14-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
And he has his fingers on the butterfly triggers of that Dishka, and he's ready to just evaporate you. And none of that armor is going to stop it. So you could either really get smart at understanding your operational environment and adapting to it and realizing that you're not a special operator anymore. And if you use those same conventional tactics to counter what you faced in the military, it's going to get you killed really fast.
Did you find, that adaptation kind of turning into becoming a master out of necessity of negotiating and, kind of finding the middle ground?
Absolutely, man.
How big of a role does that play in your day-to-day now?
That's a great point, because that's where I was going to go with it. Is it almost made my special operations career, because I consider that special operations, it almost made it full circle, because I didn't realize what civilians deal with in semi-permissive environments. Dallas-Fort Worth is a semi-permissive environment. You could be at church hearing the gospel one minute and then be getting engaged by doing a shotgun, right? Like it happened in White Pleasant.
How badass was that fucking shot?
It was good.
Yeah.
He said, though, he meant to hit him in the chest and he shot him in the face.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I was like, hey, that's if you're gonna aim small and miss small and it hits him in his face, that's okay.
Yeah.
But you're operating in an environment that there's a lot of unknowns, and I didn't realize the tactic. Because low-vis environments for special operators isn't really low-vis.
Yeah.
I mean, there is singleton unique circumstances for that, but it's not really low-vis. Low-vis isn't donning a ball cap in a foreign country.
Yeah, growing a beard.
That's not low-vis.
Oh, who's this guy? I don't know who this guy is. He's got a beard. He's cool.
Yeah.
Let him in.
Yeah, he's still 6'1" with tattoos, sleeves,
the white guy
Solomons, and then
Yeah.
a Sunto watch. But, when I did that and experienced that, that's where I started my company, Fieldcraft Survival. And then when I came off of that, most of the things that I teach people today is not from special operations. Most of it's from that job as a contractor, because you start getting real creative on how you're going to survive in those environments.
Yeah, because the reality of it is, and that's a good point, is that, special operations experience, whether it's SEAL, Ranger, Green Beret, unit, Tier 1, whatever, is that you're always with 16 to 40 other fucking super capable dudes. Yeah. Whereas, for the agency, you're, one, maybe two guys. Most of it is way more applicable to mainstream. You don't have much. You don't have the cavalry you can call. You don't have fucking overhead support. Like it's you and
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, I think the parallel and that transition is pretty awesome. That church shooting made me think of, you said he aimed for his chest and hit him in the head.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, like from a tactics standpoint, active shooter-wise, that would the lesson learned from there is always aim for the chest. And if you're high, you hit him in the head. If you're low, you hit him in the fucking pelvis. So
100%.
Yeah. So you headshot assholes out there.
Yeah.
That want to fucking cross the eyes, fucking maybe shoot center mass. I don't know. Moving into what you're doing now, one of the questions that I have for guys in your position. And this is via a bunch of other people that have, asked me when I have certain guests with your guys' skill sets and what you do for a living now, is there a concern from a active shooter, school shooting, civilian populace standpoint in your guys' wheelhouse? Does it register? Is it a factor? Is it something that you think about or don't give a fuck or make contingency plans for, in terms of putting information out there that maybe some crazy fuck is going to go through any of these courses and become very, very skilled at being a better problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something that always we think about. And when I think even as a sergeant major in Special Forces, just bearing a broader responsibility of operational security, what my responsibilities are, I think there's always a chance, and no matter what we discuss, and compromising something we really don't want to compromise, but it's probably something that we can't track as a metric. It's something that we can't really analyze. Most active shooters that deliberately plan they're either on medication or they have mental health issues, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you look at human society as a whole, and even the people that I train, We're all fucked up in some way. We all have trauma that we deal with. But the difference between being fucked up and dealing with trauma and then taking the actions necessary to take somebody's life is very stark in its contrast.
Sure. Well, and I'll give you my thoughts, my responses to them. But before that, I wanted to ask: Have you ever had anybody in any of your classes or reach out to to you that you were like, man, this fucking dude I don't think so.
I have.
Yeah.
I've identified guys myself. I've actually done background checks after. What I tell people is, for me, a flat range is a very good place to read behavior. And, I learned in JSOC and a whole bunch of other high-speed courses, even with the agency, of behavioral dynamics and how to assess people's behavior analytically, not just as like a philosophical thing, but look at people, see what they're doing, and then make observations that could determine whether or not they're a threat. Yeah. And I've done it. I've reported dudes. I've taken people's personal information. If you sign up for a course on my course in fieldcraftsurvival.com, you're giving me your personal information. That's a part of the business transaction. But good training companies will take the time to look at names, look at information, and assess whether or not they're a potential threat to society. Yeah. If I have a dude acting insane, which I've had a couple times, you better believe that I'm going to report that person and be like, hey, man, this is a feeling, open source wise, and this is nothing that we're doing that's classified or whatever, but open source wise, what are the cursory checks that we could do to make sure that we're doing due diligence just in case it does happen? Not just protecting our ass, but alerting people that, hey, is there anything out of the ordinary with this person that would maybe complement what we've observed? And if there is, maybe we need to do some reporting. Yeah.
Do you think running background checks on people for courses is a good solution or a good answer? Do you think that takes a step too far?
I think it's unrealistic, right? I think because I've looked into it, and like last class that we taught in Dallas Fort Worth, we trained 50 students,
and half of them were crazy Texans, right?
Oh, they're Texans, right? So everybody's got a past, and I'm in no position as a business owner in training responsible citizens and fundamentals to start doing background investigations on them. And that doesn't mean it doesn't have to, it can't be done. Like, for example, if you attend my contractor development course, 1, you have to be a U.S. citizen. 2, you have to meet the minimum requirements to get a job as a contractor. If you do not, and you just sign up, I'm doing a cursory search on you, which is the equivalent for us is doing like a, what do they call the interim clearance? Yeah. And so that's just a background investigation to make sure you're not a criminal. Yeah. And that we will do that in specific courses.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. I know, there's some shit going on in Virginia right now. I just saw, there's a bunch of shit, but even, one proposed measure is to basically say the only shooting ranges that can exist in that state have to be in a state-owned facility, basically, which is a total crock of shit. But to me, circling back to my thoughts on it, my response to people that have written in and asked me, hey, you've had, a number of guys on, what if some crazy fuck takes one of their courses and does, half a dozen from all the top names in the industry and gets really good at being a real motherfucker? Like, how do you leverage that, or how do you deal with that? And to me, my response is really paralleled to everything else that's fucking dangerous. You could take gun ownership as the most apt analogy, I think, is that, to me, trying to regulate guys like you teaching this is not the answer. Doing background checks is not the answer. And I purposely didn't share my opinion prior to, because I just wanted to hear what you thought. But, to me, it's no different than owning a gun, is that the reality is that evil exists. And you're picking a lesser of two evils by saying, I would rather there be a contingent of well-trained civilians out there
that could manage that one shithead
that are caring, that have this skill set, than to say, okay, well, nobody's going to get trained, and now you've got more fish in the barrel to be fucking shot. Yeah. To me, that just makes sense, because you're never going to be able to legislate good behavior, manners, or a lack of evil, and in trying to do so, all you do is, I think the analogy is, what is it? The antelope isn't any the antelope isn't any safer by pulling his fucking horns off, type of thing. Is that then that's all that is that all you're doing is restricting good, decent civilians that aren't what you're worried about anyway, and you're prohibiting them from fixing the problem. Because I know, like, this Texas shooting being the most recent, I think, classic example of how it can actually be done right. Is
Absolutely.
that there was 4 or 5 other armed folks in the audience that that I saw some comment of somebody saying, like, what's most troublesome is that guy that shot and killed. Well, there was 4 or 5 other people that were armed in that room too. Like, who knows what their background would. And is like, well, here's the reality: is that in a real world scenario, those 4 or 5 other people armed didn't shoot anybody, didn't draw their pistols, didn't shoot the guy more than like nothing else bad happened. Like, the dude came in and the guy smoked him fucking within a matter of seconds. That's his textbook of good example of where guns do make a big difference. Because if that had happened in California, there'd have been 45 fucking people dead. You know. And it's just, to me, it's one of those realities. And you hear all the time, Second Amendment wise, gun registrations and restrictions and whatever. And, my take has always been, you could outlaw firearms because, really, if your idea of the fix is getting rid of guns, which is impossible, but that's your goal, go ahead and do that. Make owning a firearm a federal felony and overnight. Those half a dozen fucking multi-billion-dollar franchise cartels that are down in Mexico are going to add gun running to their revenue streams. Like, because if you think that the drive and the demand for guns is going to go down if you outlaw them, it's going to skyrocket. And they can get anything in here. The reason there's not guns being run right now is because they're not illegal. So, I mean, they bring everything that's illegal. It's not just drugs, and so I don't know why that seems to be lost. I know I'm preaching to the choir and I'm getting off on a fucking tangent like I do sometimes. I would love to get your take politically, I guess, in that, from a Second Amendment standpoint with the training that you do in terms of active shooter school shootings. Is that your answer? Do you have any amplifying information as to how to help stop those instances when they do happen?
Yeah, I think one is you have to understand in America, to get a driver's license, you have to attend driver's ed. You have to drive a motor vehicle on the roads, no matter what age you are, and it starts very young, even at 15, getting your permit, that you have to go through some formalized training. And that's to better protect the other people that are on the roads. And one of the problems I have is it's not the universal lack of training. I think it's the lack of training culturally, period. So that causes a lot of issues on both sides. One side, which is the anti-gun movement, is we have guns, they're dangerous, nobody should be able to use them, right?
And they don't understand.
them. And so, like you said, guns exist in our community. They're already there. They're a staple of American history. So the National Rifle Association, for example, started after 1864, following the Civil War, realizing that there was a whole bunch of citizens who didn't know how to use guns to protect themselves, because you had, whether it was the North or South, invading neighborhoods and houses and homes and pillaging, and nobody was able to protect themselves. Hell, we didn't know what fucking tactics were. I mean, 7,000 people died in a 20-minute battle during the Civil War. So culturally, we've been shaped around guns, and now you have one side that doesn't understand it. But if I educate people, which is a part of my mission with Fieldcraft Survival, and what guns benefits are when safely used and trained, then they go, oh, you know what? I don't have to wait to be a victim, because now I understand logically the argument. I don't have to wait to be a victim to become a conservative 2A card-carrying member, or whatever your take and spin on 2A is. Even versus the people who think they know guns but don't know guns really. Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of people, over 1,000 people, for example, between accidents and unintentional shootings, die every single year out of the 39,000, damn near 40,000 people who die from firearms. 60% of that overall number are suicide. So always the numbers are used and skewed. 1 to 2% of that's actually an AR, a weapon of war. And a very small number, only a few hundred, and I don't want to say only, but a few hundred compared to the 40,000 are from active shootings. So the reality is we have to be trained. And one of my responsibilities as somebody who has lived by the gun is to train responsible gun ownership and responsible training to defend life. That's all fundamentally. That's not advanced free flow CQB.
Yeah.
That's not Haas's rescue on linear targets. I'm not teaching people to be snipers when I teach them fundamentals, because they could be a better hunter, a safer hunter. They could be a better sport shooter, a safer sport shooter, and they could better protect themselves.
Well, I also wonder that makes me think of if there's a potential benefit also in, because there's such a lack of, we'll call it gun ownership training by comparison to, say, 50, 60 years ago when, most schools taught basic rifle handling, and basic marksmanship in a lot of gym classes. And kids would have a fucking bolt action or a hunting shotgun racked in the fucking vehicle parked in the parking lot, and there weren't the shootings. I do wonder if by reintroducing more training so that people are more familiar with it, if by somehow that could potentially, garner a higher respect for life or a better understanding of it, is that maybe it wouldn't happen as much. I don't know. It's possible. More than anything, I think it has more to do with nutrition, frankly. Is that I think, most people, kids especially as they grow up, between the stimulation of devices and TV and video games, I'm not blaming it on video games, but I'm saying the lack of a personal connection with people, because you see it with a lot of kids who are more and more socially awkward because there's so much less social interaction with text and Snapchat and all this other shit, combined with the fact that while moms are pregnant and kids are developing, they're being fed food that is not biologically appropriate to grow fucking human beings. And a lot of people may hear that and be like, what kind of whiz bang crazy bullshit is that? I think that's most of it.
It's science, yeah.
I really do. I think that, most kids' learning disabilities and all these other fucking depression problems and whatever is because their brains are underdeveloped and fucked up from eating shit that's basically poison. I really do. But anyway, that's a whole nother podcast. It's like 49 that we just had two episodes ago. But anything you want to add to kind of the political environment as it relates to what you do? Yeah,
I think there's a very scary thing that's taking place in this country, which is a part which is typically associated with the left. I'm actually very independent when it comes to political deviation left or right. I'm conservative, but I do have some social. I'm left on a lot of social issues, but I'm right of center, whatever the fuck that means. But
that means you're anticipating recoil, I think.
yeah. No follow through. Yeah. So what I think is I'm fearful of is the rural America doesn't like to be involved with epicenters of political drama. We just don't fucking deal with it, right? I'm rural America. I don't like to deal with the epicenters. So when we lack the influence and the representation in the epicenters, what happens, and which is classic examples in LA, San Francisco, Denver, Colorado, name any major city, and this is taking place. And now Virginia with the governor of Virginia, Minneapolis, Minnesota is a good example of that, where he banned warrior mindset training. So what's taking place is you have the governments being run by the epicenters, the urban controlled population. They're getting involved. They're voting because they're involved in the central populous areas, and they're creating laws that the rural counties don't agree with. In this case, in Virginia, some of the laws that they created, in fact, the institution of a gun assault ban, where they were going to confiscate weapons, which is Governor Rantham's whole fucking policy was driven off this. His whole administration is going after this in January of this year, which is now. And every single sheriff, for the most part, this is 20, 30, 40, 50 agencies have said, we are not going to enforce. In fact, the governor or the sheriff of Culpeper County said, I will deputize 1,000 of my citizens to fight the central government, the Department of Justice in this case, from coming in and enacting or enforcing these laws. So what you're going to have happen is essentially civil wars take place between cities, departments of justice, trying to enforce laws through law enforcement officers and agencies who don't and refuse to enforce laws that are going against constitutional rights and infringing on constitutional rights.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people get super spun up on stuff like this. And while I'm not saying it should be ignored or scoffed at, I also, the realist in me thinks, I work with, just like you guys, I work with a lot of fucking police department, law enforcement at every level, all over the country regularly. And, the mentality and mindset of 95% of them are just like you and I. And, for the handful, the single percenters that may actually try to, enforce something like that, there's 10 to 1 that aren't.
Absolutely.
And so to me, it's kind of like, I mean, fucking knock yourself out and pass whatever you think you're going to pass. But, when the rubber meets the road and ultimately, like, nobody's going to do shit about it. And even if they do, like, if you think about it from, you and I know more than most people, like the logistics and the reality of trying to enforce something like that. Do you think that people are just going to be like, yeah, okay, here you go. Like, from my cold dead hands is not a bumper sticker for a reason, or it is a bumper sticker for a reason. And it's not just a bumper sticker, is that, trying to do that, how many of your citizens are going to be lost trying to enforce that before all of them are like, fuck you, I didn't sign up for this.
Absolutely.
Because, like it's going to be like fucking Iraq.
Yep.
You're going to be getting fucking ambushed and like it's not going to be fucking pretty. And how long is that going to happen before they're like, you know what, maybe we ought to rethink this, because people are that passionate about it, rightfully so. But at any rate, one last political question, I guess, and we'll talk about what you got going on is from a foreign policy and just kind of big picture government standpoint. It's impossible to argue that it's not a fucking train wreck. It's a divisive mess. What is your thoughts as a former operator and somebody who spent, their entire adult life in service of his country, in a lot of dangerous places? What do you think is wrong, and what do you think the fix is?
I mean, politically, we're divided, but I will remind people that I have a problem with political correctness and old legacy politicians. I think one of the biggest problems that we have now is we have a political system that allows politicians to make a career out of being a politician and becoming millionaires off of that. So the incentive is money and power, which is part of being a politician. And if there was no power, no popularity, then you wouldn't be a politician. Most of these politicians wouldn't do it. In fact, it's one of the problems because to be a popular politician, you have to be fringe, on left or right. You can't just be a good case of this is Tulsi Gabbard, right? Veteran, woman, minority, Democrat, super squared away, but her own party is shitting on her because she's not fringe. Yeah. She's moderate.
I do disagree with her Soleimani fucking criticism, but
I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah. I mean, she basically disagrees with it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I completely agree with it wholeheartedly.
No, same here.
Yeah. I like when people talk about it's a Trump thing. It's like, no, it's a intelligence community thing.
Dude, Obama authorized like 425 fucking drone strikes. I mean, think of it, Anwar al-Awlaki. Like, he was an American citizen that Obama authorized a drone strike killing him overseas. Yeah. Nobody gave a fuck about that. Like, agreed. I support both of them.
Yeah.
But don't have a problem with Soleimani getting smoked, but turn a fucking blind eye to the over 400 drone strikes that Obama approved. Like, that's just fucking chicken dick.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, he's one thing I am surprised about is they didn't make it a covert action. Like, I would have made it, I would have made it look like an IED.
Yeah.
And then I would have just written it off as like, we don't know who the fuck did it.
Maybe it was an IED and they made it look like a drone strike.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Israel.
We had to come out. Yeah.
It was Israel, but we made it look like we did it.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that dude, I was fighting in Sadr City when we were targeting those dudes. Yeah. And
did you know about him specifically back then?
Yeah. I did. I've seen him on decks. Mukhtar al-Sadr, the head of the Shia militia in Sadr City, who's boys with Soleimani. I mean, that dude, he's responsible for killing 608 Americans and thousands of coalition forces.
Yeah.
The EFPs that we had something in task force called Team Rock. And Team Rock, and I'm saying this, it's not classified because these guys deserve the credit. We used to roll with 2 T-51, M1 Abram tanks.
Going back to World War II, I think.
Yeah. I watched.
So there's a Panzer rolling up in Baghdad, right?
We put the Abrams in front of our convoy, and they would suck up the EFPs. These shape charged IEDs that Iran and Soleimani personally brought over for the militia. That we would, in fact, the rotation before I ripped in, 3 SEALs were killed. I think from Team 8 or 3. Cut through the vehicle, cut the barrel off the 50 cal like a laser beam because it's a shape charge. Yeah. And it's killed lots of Americans, including special operations. And they were known to be around Sadr City. So we would go in with tanks. They would rip through the tanks. We'd leave the tanks on the side of the road and then continue movement with strikers into the Sadr City and go kill bad guys. And without those tanks, we wouldn't be able to make entry. But Soleimani has thousands of human beings and coalition forces on his hands, and he's a terrorist. Yeah. Maybe you think because there's sovereignty in Iran, because they're part of the UN, that there somehow can't be terrorist affiliation. If one of our commanders, General Miller, was a freaking terrorist the next day, and he was doing suicide attacks with his men, he'd be a terrorist. Yeah. He wouldn't be General Miller. Yeah. I wholeheartely agree that should have been done a long time ago. And in fact, McChrystal had the opportunity to do it and couldn't get an approval from Obama to do a drone airstrike. Yeah. Back to the political affiliation and divisiveness. Politicians who make millions of dollars as a career is a fucking problem. Yeah. If me and you went into the Army or the Navy as E1s, right? We enlisted as ones with the idea that we were going to make millions of dollars in speaking engagements, and somehow we're going to make a career out of it for 40 plus years and become millionaires, we'd never leave the fucking military. Yeah. And then, you look at somebody like Nancy Pelosi, who's got 30 plus years, I think it's 38 years of service to her country. There's both sides. This old legacy shit, the reason Trump is so divisive is because he's real. Mm-hmm. What you see with Trump is he's an asshole on Twitter, but he's still an asshole in real life and an asshole everywhere he goes the same way. Yeah. What you see is what you get. Yeah. And that's more significant to me because I know what happens when politicians become politicians. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, speaking to your exit out of the military, right, is that it's that mentality that's corrupted the military in the places that it has been corrupted. Thank God it's not everywhere, but it's prominent enough for it to absolutely be a fucking problem, and just like that is that when you've got military commanders that are making decisions because their mentality is politician, is that it's what I'm doing next. It's let me achieve this certain level of rank, which means now I jump into this congressional fucking spot or whatever their follow on once they get out gig of rubbing elbows with these fucking assholes. And that's what they're making their decisions based on. It has nothing to do with what the right fucking thing is. And so, it's prevalent in the higher ups of some of the military, and it's overwhelmingly just fucking terrible within the government at the executive level. But my take is that having guys like you, like me, like people that have this opinion but have the experience to have an opinion on it that's relevant. There should be way more guys like that in office. I don't know how many fucking times people have been like, why don't you, run for something? And it's like, I'll tell you why, is because I don't want, somebody's fucking job, or an entire team of people's job to make it their goal in life to try to make me look like the biggest asshole that they can make me look like.
They'll accomplish that really fast.
It's not going to be hard for them.
It won't take long.
But it's like, I don't want to bring that on my fucking family.
That's key,
like they don't need that shit, and let's be honest, like I don't want that shit, like I'm happy to help out, but I mean, show one politician that's actually tried to do the right thing that either A, accomplished it, or B, got sucked into the fucking into the fray of scratching this guy's back. I mean, the quid pro quo thing. I mean, that's politics. Like every fucking one of every individual on the Hill and in Washington D.C. is guilty of it to a certain degree. And I want no fucking part of that. From your perspective, do you think it's fixable, and what does that look like to you?
I don't think overarching it's going to be fixed. I think the more technology drives our social behaviors in life, the more we get away from knowing our neighbors and talking and communicating like people, the less we're going to give a shit. And like I say, even when politicians criticize Trump, for example, and you could take it either way. I'm just, I'm pandering to the percentage of people who listen to this who might think I'm biased, but understand that when you criticize a politician, you're criticizing people, right? So that representative of those people is who you're offending. But what I think people forget, especially career politicians who lose sight of reality, that the criticizing they're doing it and they're insulting half of the country. Yeah. And that's what's creating the divide. Yeah. Media is creating the divide. The messaging, Twitter, politicians, influencers, people who want popularity, they're creating the divide. Yeah. And I always remind people that at the end of the day, people are what make this country. That's the whole Constitution, right? It's we the people. It's not we the politicians. Yeah. So I go out and I'm all over the United States every single year, and I see what people are doing. I don't want to be a politician. My task and purpose is training civilians. Last year, we trained 2,000 civilians in 60 different courses, a dozen agencies, and the list goes on. That's my mission and my focus. But politics, man, it's a dire situation, and the only thing I think it's going to take is moderates coming forward and becoming popular because they're moderate, and then being logical about the next moves instead of what we have now, which is the fringe of both sides.
Well, I think, to your point on the social corruption via social media and just the internet in general, is that it's created a mentality in our society that really only pays attention to the clickbait, type of mentality, where, like, if it's not shocking, it's like watching porn, frankly, is that it starts off one-on-one missionary and that's your jam. And 20 years later, like, if I'm not scared of what I'm watching, I'm not even interested. Like, it's that same mentality is that these people, if it's not some headline grabbing, clip on fucking social media, like, they're not even paying attention to it, and it's sad, but fuck, that's the reality of it. I'm right there with you. Like, I don't want to be a politician for, the aforementioned sentiments that I have, in conjunction with, just like with you, like my mission, my goal, I feel like my purpose is with dogs, is helping people with their dogs. So that's what I'm into. But at any rate, where can people find you? And if you could circle back to kind of what you guys offer, if people are interested in having you either put something on for them or just kind of talk about what you have going on now.
Yeah, fieldcraftsurvival.com, Fieldcraft Survival on most channels. Like, we do Fieldcraft Survival, Fieldcraft Survival Fit, Fieldcraft Mobility. It's tying in what we see as preparedness, which is really everything. Your mindset, your physical capabilities, the way you train your family. And we try to provide as much content and educational platforms as possible. We have a podcast called the Fieldcraft Survival Podcast, which is pretty popular in government on iTunes, Spotify, Luminary. And we also provide free content on YouTube, which is a big push for me this year. I think we just gained like 20,000 subscribers in the last 10 days, thanks to Sean Ryan. Yeah. Big shout out to Sean Ryan and Vigilance Elite. And we're just trying to push that to get people to come out and train with us. Like, we do training courses every single weekend in the United States, from long gun, pistol carbine, to med, mindset, survival. I have a special operations prep course in February. So we're just grinding to get better prepared for the worst case scenario. And
on the Fieldcraft website, are all the courses kind of outlined of what they are?
They are.
Schedule and all that shit.
Yep. All the entire schedule, we're booked out until April of this year. And we do like a 90-day cycle. So we'll always update, and we're everywhere from I'll be in New Jersey, and I'll be in Colorado or California next week, Colorado the week after, New Jersey the week after, South Carolina the week after. So we're all over the United States training in all the above.
Yeah, that's fucking awesome. Is there anything you want to add?
Now, you guys could find me personally on my Instagram. It's mike.a.glover on Instagram. I'm just trying to keep it positive, man. I'm trying to get the message out there that we are our own first response. I love first responders, but the better prepared we are as a society, the better we'll help first responders who are jumping through hoops to get to us.
The less we have to lean on them.
The less we have to lean on them. And they appreciate the capability because we're not teaching people to be gunfighters. We're teaching people to think before they act, and then when they act, being proficient at what they act. Yeah. And I also want to say, man, I've done a lot of podcasts, and I know a lot of people in this industry and space, and what we're even doing now and what you're doing as with dogs, which have saved my life personally, and with podcasts is super important in creating the right narratives for the right direction for people to go outside of their fucking phones.
Amen. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's absolutely the attraction to podcasting that I was drawn to, was just the fact that there's no middleman, there's no influence, there's nobody saying, well, no, you can't say that. I mean, it's your own fucking deal. And to me, the popularity of shows like this, of Sean's, of yours, of Jocko's, of a number of veteran podcasts that really kind of speak to the mentality of most Americans, frankly, or at least fucking half of them, unfiltered, completely digestible by whoever the fuck wants to do it, and seeing the popularity grow so fast tells you quite a bit about the desire for that to be more prominent in our culture. I'm glad that as a medium and a platform, it's still available. Hopefully it'll stay that way, and it doesn't get fucked up. But well, I appreciate you coming on. Hearing the fucking stories between the dogs and just all of the different scenarios and stories that you've shared personally are very valuable and very much appreciated. I know the listenership will love this episode, and will start paying attention and following you if they don't already. I'm sure there's a fair bit of overlap already, but I appreciate the hell out of you taking the time to come on and sit here flapping our gums for as long as we have. So thank you for coming. Origin Labs, again, is our main sponsor. Jocko's products, gis, all of the supplements, boots, jeans, as well as teamdog.pet for any of your dog training or child rearing needs, as well as those crates. Go to tricos.com for all my products, crates that are coming out shortly, the CBD oil, the dog food and dog treats, and obviously the training and dogs as well is on there, but go check that out. Once again, a huge thanks to Mr. Mike Glover for coming on, sharing his expertise and opinion on everything. And last but certainly not least, to you guys, the listener. If not for you, we would not have this platform to bring to you a couple times a month. So I appreciate the hell out of you guys tuning in for as long as you do. I know they're longer episodes, but that's where you really get to the good meat and potatoes and the shit that's worthwhile instead of just the flash in the pan. So anything to add on your end, Mike?
No, thanks so much, guys. I appreciate everything you guys do, and thanks for your service to this country and having me on the podcast.
Oh, hell yeah. My pleasure. So without further ado, thanks again, and we will see you guys soon. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.